To the September meeting for the Fairfield Board of Finance, I'm going to ask that we do the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to ask Mrs. Alvin to lead us in the pledge this evening.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and I'd ask that everyone remains standing for a moment. Far too often the last couple of years we've had to ask for a moment of silence for members of our community or leaders in our community that passed away. Sadly, this week we lost former Fire Chief Russell, who I just happened to meet at a few of the town events. He preceded my involvement in town politics. I think most of us on this board, he probably preceded many of us. But we used to see him at town events, particularly veterans events. He will be missed. He was a dedicated member of the community and a dedicated servant. And our thoughts and prayers go out to him, his family, as well as the entire Fairfield Fire Department. Thank you very much. All right, we have a relatively light agenda this evening. We have an update on the status of minutes and record retention policy. I'll go through to that. That's a follow-up item. Review the Board of Ed financial positions versus budget. For the fourth quarter of last fiscal year, that was June 30th, we had some questions that came up at our quarterly review. Due to that being in July, there weren't members of the Board of Education present at that meeting. Item number 3 is to hear, consider, and act upon resolutions from Public Works related to some solar energy projects that they have going on, correct? Oh, no, this is the microgrid, right? Sorry, I misstated that. I just didn't want to read the whole resolution at this point. Then we're going to hear a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer for a transfer from $100,000 from the contingency accounts to the IT professional service account. This is a follow-up item from the budget. We're briefly going to hear some subcommittee updates. We've had a fair amount of subcommittee work, fund balance, investment subcommittee, and reporting subcommittee, and any other communications. Mr. Bolito sends his regrets this evening. He is preparing for the impending nuptials of his daughter this coming weekend. Mrs. Bossi has a commitment with her children this evening, and Mrs. LeClaire is going to be late for the same reason or similar reason. Before we start, do we have any questions, comments from board members? All right, seeing none, the first item on the agenda is an update on the status of the minutes and record retention policy. I wanted to put this on here since Mrs. Bossi wasn't going to be here this evening and we need a little bit more time. You will recall we had a very good discussion at our last meeting related to our minutes, particularly regarding detailed of discussions and comments related to voting items in our minutes, particularly the budget night. That was the specific one, the early April meeting when we voted on the budget. We're putting together a policy on that. We're standardizing our minutes format. Now, in years past, there had been a standard formats for minutes, but quite frankly, we've gone through a series of change here with several different secretaries of the minutes for these meetings. We haven't had consistency in the secretaries of our minutes, so we're putting together a standard format for that. We're also updating our records retention policy. So there's the formal written minutes, which we vote on each time, which, quite frankly, the only thing that legally needs to be in those minutes is actually voting items. That's it. There's nothing other than that legally needs to be in minutes, and in fact, many corporations, including ones I've been involved with, that's all that they put in the minutes. But at occasion, we want to put more in there, and we need to discuss that. And the second thing is, all of our meetings are videotaped now, and the videotapes, we want a record retention policy on those videotapes to make sure that we have access to them and that per chance if something's not recorded in the written minutes, we can actually have access to it for a video meeting. So I've been working with Caitlin to put together a policy on that, and we'll bring that before the board, an updated policy on all those items at our next meeting. So I wanted to make sure, because we had a good discussion on that last time. Any questions, comments, or concerns on that? All right. Then, the next follow-up item from that meeting was to review the Board of Education financial position versus the budget for the year ending June 30th for 2013. I see Dr. Tittle here is here, Mr. Dwyer's here, Ms. Manzel's here. Please come on up. Long time no see. Long time no see. Good. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so why don't we start with, can you walk us through perhaps this sheet? I'll leave it to you, but I would think this sheet and perhaps the major classifications and summary object sheets, and call out some highlights for us, and we can ask questions as we go along.
Sure. So we'll start with the document you first referenced, budget transfers and updated balances as of July 31, 2013. Is that the one you're looking at?
Yes, please.
People all have that?
I believe we do.
Okay. So the, per Board of Education policy, the board needs to, and under the statute, transfer funds out of account groups at the end of the year to balance off overage in one set of account groups with another. And so you see the account groups listed there: personnel services, fixed charges, pupil personnel, school expenses, support expenses, maintenance, et cetera, capital outlay. Those are the account groups. So if we find in the course of the year that we're going to overexpend one of those groups, then we basically go to the board in June and say, this is what we think we need to do to balance it off, and this is what the board votes on. Now, this is a final version. The board actually votes on one in June, and there weren't huge changes, but you can see the transfer request approved by the Board of Ed, 62513 column. That's what we asked the Board of Ed to transfer. So the big account this past year where we had an under expenditure, it's also our biggest account, is personnel services, which comprises a lot of smaller accounts. And while I know that looks like a big number, it stands out on the page, that's a $99 million account. So you're talking about 1% variance there, budget to actual. And you can see where that comes from in there. One of the bigger explanations in there is the second line down, additional retirees. And we went through this before. We've gone through this during the budget, where we budget for a certain number of retirees, and then you might recall that this past year we had many, many more than we budgeted for, and that's part of what explains the under expenditure there.
Do you have those numbers? What are those numbers?
Yeah, last year we had budgeted for, it was 14 retirees. This is uncertified retirees, and we ended up with 24. And originally the budget was 12, and then when we made a budget adjustment at the end, we went to 14. That's varied from year to year. This year, when we budgeted, the current year budget, we amped that up to 16, knowing that once we did that, something would probably not go right. We actually came pretty close on that. That looks like we're finishing at 18 for this year, so we're much more in the ballpark with that, but that was a concern. But at the same time, you know, there's risks all over our budget for overages and underages, and I'd rather have some, you've got to have an opportunity here to make up for things that are going to go over as well. So we don't want to extend ourselves too far there, but that's that one. That's the biggest. The fixed charges, we actually went in and overexpended that above and beyond what was in there, mainly because we made an additional contribution to the health insurance fund. Of course, we know as the year went through, we knew how the health insurance was, and we were getting out ahead of that. We had set some money aside in the wage and benefit reserve, so that was part of it. And then we got to the end of the year, and what happened when we changed carriers, which was a great benefit to us, as you recall, for whatever reason, we were never informed that the existing carriers were going to demand additional fees from us to, what do you call it, run it out. admin fees to run the contracts out. That's Anthem and Sun Life Dental. And that was a pretty good sum of money, so rather than that hitting that account, we made an additional payment to the health insurance to keep that afloat. So that's what that was all about. Pupil personnel, special ed is a highly variable expense for a lot of reasons. The grants are variable and the expenses are variable. So if your income is variable and your costs are variable, that's a tough mix. That was largely a function of unanticipated students and their needs, some outplacements, some in-placements. So that had to be covered. The school expenses, that's a accumulation of a lot of small accounts at every school and, for supplies and so on and so forth. And we tell them to, be careful down the stretch, don't just spend it all. So if we need it, we have it. Support expenses, we did go, as you can imagine, last year, and we had this discussion, I think, to some extent, began this discussion last year on security, that after Sandy Hook, we needed to make a pretty significant investment in our security, that while we are waiting for a full report from the police department on all of our facilities, we didn't want to just wait for that. There were some steps we really needed to take immediately in terms of access control, buzzer systems, video systems, card access, and so forth. And we wanted to go right ahead and do that. Of course, we hadn't planned on doing that. And so that's represented in the overage in security.
Were those one-time expenses?
Yes, yes. Those are one-time infrastructure improvements, some of which we can talk about and some we can't. But those are not ongoing costs. They're not personnel costs. They're one-time costs. Still doesn't mean that we don't need to have a long-term plan for this. This was a bit of not a stopgap, it's the wrong way to put it, but really felt the need to do something immediately to shore up some vulnerabilities that the police department felt we had, and we've done that. Legal services, this varies a lot year to year. We had several very expensive arbitrations this year. Happy to report that we won both of those. One of them had a potentially very large exposure to our health insurance account, and we really needed to put the legal resources into defending that, and we did, and we were successful. There were some other ones that were, if somebody wants to take you all the way to arbitration on personnel matters, that can get very expensive. And we had 5 contracts that we negotiated. Unfortunately, none of them got settled. You know that story on the town side, but lawyers sitting at the table not making progress cost you as much as lawyers sitting at the table making progress. So that's...
Speaking of
that went
lawyers
over.
sitting at the
Yeah.
table, Mr.
Right.
Walsh, did you have a
I wasn't
question?
really looking at Jim when I was saying that, but he appears to be the closest lawyer there. That's right. We also had, I will also say on that front, more than an average share of dispute resolutions in special ed as well, which is a legal proceeding, which even if it doesn't go all the way, can get very expensive very quickly. And your exposure in those cases is not only, if you do go all the way to the end of the due process there, you end up paying your legal expenses and the plaintiffs.
Mr. Walsh, you had a question.
So, anyway, that's probably it in terms of that sheet anyway, so.
All right.
Yeah.
In regards to the legal services, the legal services are supplied regarding the entire situation regarding the math situation. How much did that cost?
I don't think I have a final on that because the expenses on that were going on well into the summer, so there's a lag there. I don't have a number on that. We can get that, but
Yeah, I'd like you to supply it. I'd like
yeah,
you
it probably
to
there's a bit of a lag from the time the expenses are incurred till the time we get billed and we verify the bill and then we do it. But some of that would be in the current fiscal year as well. If it was incurred after July 1.
after July 1.
Right. So we can, I don't have
everything
that
up-
figure, but we can, yeah, sure, we can,
Well, do we know whether it's $5,000? Is it 50,000? You know what I'm saying?
I don't even want to hazard a guess.
You don't even have a guess?
No. Right.
Well, I guess you'll present that, and we'll have another opportunity to talk to you about that?
Well, I think we'd send you the
we
information if
follow
there
up
were
on it?
further questions. Yeah, I mean, it's, there's one of, a number
Do you have,
of complaints.
can we, without breaching any confidentiality or whatever between lawsuits that you might have, can you give us a breakdown of the different matters? We get that from the town side every once in a while. What are the categories of legal expenses you have? And since that was a high-profile one,
Right.
to Mr. Walsh's point, why don't you give us that one separately?
Yeah, we could do it in sort of big
Big buckets.
categories. Right. I think that would be fair.
That's what the town does?
Yeah. And, we do, I mean, from the Board of Ed, side, we do give them a review of all the cases that are open on a regular basis, so they do know about this. But, we have substantial legal expenses in special ed, so that's a big bucket. And then there's the labor side, and then there's,
Is your utilization of law firms coordinated with the town?
no. No, we employ two different firms. One who specializes in special education and one who specializes in sort of labor in general. Don't believe that they are the firms the town uses. Now, we also, I should say that, if we need advice that we can get from CABE, for which we pay dues to, we get their advice, and that they don't charge us for. They're very good with things like policy and so forth, but they're not our lawyer. So we also use CABE, and that's for free, and then or it's included in our dues. So that's another source of legal advice for us.
If we can just make a note for the minutes that we made that request for information?
The breakdown of the
Legal
legal
fees.
Yes.
services
Yes,
categories and the dollar amount for the math situation. I have it.
yes, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Can I ask you another question in that same area in regards to legal? On this sheet, you have it as legal. On these sheets where it goes into more detail, does that be considered under professional/technical services? Because there's no, under support expenses, there's no listing for legal that I see. So is that considered just be a professional/technical services?
Yeah, we don't have the account number over there. Do you know which one that's in, Doreen?
I was just trying to tie it out, I
Right.
couldn't seem to find it.
I think it's under support expenses.
What number?
Any other questions?
We'll work
Will?
on it.
I have, is it dovetail on this? Because okay, then I'm going to go to Mr. DeWitt, who had his, thanks, and then I'll come back to
While
you.
you're looking there. Good evening. Quick question on maintenance, right? So we've got emergency maintenance. I totally understand that. There's a maintenance project that came in the black, and then there's other maintenance that came in the red. Did we accomplish all the maintenance we wanted to accomplish and still ran over? Or did we accomplish 50% and still run over?
Yeah, they're all different ideas there. So the maintenance project, that probably should be plural, maintenance projects.
Uh-huh.
That's a number of specified projects that we estimate their costs, and we do them all, and they come in at that amount. However, last year, in order to help fund our security expenses, we did defer on one of those maintenance projects, and that was
Okay.
the lockers at Fairfield Woods Middle School. Those were
Right, so
scheduled
that's-
to be
that's why that's a
replaced.
positive,
That's
right?
the main reason why that's there. That was about I'm thinking $80,000 project.
Okay.
And in fact, I had talked about that publicly right after Sandy Hook. And because we were putting in the buzzers and locking the doors.
I seem to remember
Remember
yeah,
that? And I said,
conversation,
well, thank you, Dr. Rosato. You've donated your locker so that we can do that. So that's an example there.
Right.
The other maintenance accounts, that's a whole slew of accounts, supplies, and so forth. And actually, one of the reasons that went over is a couple years ago we had such a backlog in our plumbing. we added a second plumber, which was a great idea, because we got a lot done, but every time he does something, he uses supplies. And so we had not increased
Very.
our supplies for the plumber. I mean, probably should have thought of that, but the guy did great work. We got a ton done, but it cost us more in terms of
Sure.
supplies. So that's supplies and technical services and this sort of thing all lumped together. But the big thing under the maintenance project, the one item, was deferred.
No, I'm okay with the numbers.
Yep.
I guess my question is,
So we did get everything done but that one project.
oh, so everything did get done?
Yes, everything got done but that one project, but that was intentional.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's what I want.
Mr. Brockville?
305.
Did we have the answer to the other question?
Let's go to the answer real quick.
It is under 305, which was where Mr. Walsh was looking.
Professional fees and
Yeah,
services.
so you could see that the original appropriation was 323, but then we needed to transfer 233 in there to balance it off. So you could kind of see where the overage hit. Okay.
Any other questions on this item, Mr. Walsh?
In that area?
Yeah.
Yeah. The security expenses, you kind of explained that that was some of the Sandy Hook retrofitting of some of these buildings. And is that all of it? So I'm looking at $587,948 going in. Would you say all of that was basically security retrofitting post Sandy Hook?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have for that section.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Brockville.
Thanks. Good evening. Just a quick question back. My antenna go up when I see something like this. Could you just describe a little more detail this $175,000 fees that you were hit with
Yeah.
as we changed insurance carriers?
As our insurance specialist was working with Anthem in particular to complete the run-out and transition over, they sent us a bill for, their bill was $150, something like that. There was another one, but much smaller. And so we checked with Aon and we said, what's up with this? Do we have to pay this? They were holding up payments to vendors on behalf of our employees until they held us hostage.
Right.
And said, yeah, they have the right to do that. Not all of them do it, but they can because there's additional work involved in, running out previous claims. They have to do work into July to pay claims that were incurred in June, and they're not getting paid in July. So they basically billed us an additional administrative fee to, I guess they weren't too happy that we changed carriers on them.
Right. I was just saying, it seems like a really big number. It's
Yeah.
like a little bit of a slap. I would just suggest that going forward someday, maybe sooner, we'll be shopping our insurance again. I think we should keep a mental note of the way they treated us on the way out.
Well, they're done.
Well, for now, but I mean, 5 years from now, we
Oh,
might
yeah,
shop
right,
it again, and
right.
they may come back and bid. And
Exactly, right.
I think that's a little insulting, to be perfectly honest, given the size
Caught-
of the account we had.
Caught
and
us by
how long
surprise, but we were going to not pay it, but then that would have put our employees at risk.
You confirmed that we were contractually obligated to pay
Yes,
it.
and we asked, Aon's our source for this, and they said, no, you've got to pay that. It's like in the fine print, I guess, when you cancel your DirecTV account.
well, they have less leverage on you. You said,
Negotiated.
right, good, I'll ask someone
did.
second. Thanks, Bob.
Oh, Doreen makes, excuse me.
Yeah,
Doreen.
please.
We did, that's what they initially billed us, but we did negotiate that into half of what they billed us for.
That was my next question. That's true.
Right.
Well, that's better than nothing.
Yep.
And Bob Stone just made a good point to me, which is that we might want to check, prospectively about the new guys we have, whether or not they're going to
Right.
try and do that to us someday. So anyway, I appreciate it.
Yep,
Thank
yep.
you.
Any other questions on these items?
Did we talk about capital? Are we going there or no?
Sure.
Under technology, there's a note that, there was, you basically overspent it
Yes,
by about, on one sheet it says 200, it's about 209.
about 200,000.
209. And it says wireless project overage
Yeah.
and capital replacement of tech equipment. So the wireless, let's talk about the wireless project overage. What was the amount that it was supposed to be, and how much did we go over on it, and why?
Oh,
Because it seems to be a kind of
Nancy
a...
is right here, but, so I'll tell you what the project was. The project was to install our wireless in our elementary and middle schools. And when that project went out to bid, it came in considerably over budget. and we held off on it for a little while. It's at the same time we were hit with, which of those catastrophes was going to cost us a lot of money? Oh, well, no, there was the Osborne Hill PCBs. We weren't sure we were going to get that money. We were spending, as it turned out, about $800,000, and we held off on that. And then when the town was gracious enough to reimburse us for that, we were able to move ahead with it. But I'll ask Nancy if she remembers the numbers, or round numbers, on that one. And the other one, part of that was the Ludlow server crashed on us. That's the critical replacement of tech equipment. Do you remember how much that was over, the wireless project? Yeah.
Wireless project, I believe, was over about $120,000 from our original estimates, primarily because there was more wiring needed than we had anticipated. So the cost of that infrastructure bill was more than we budgeted.
Yeah. So she said it was about 120,000 over the budget.
And
What
what
was
was the
the
original
budget?
budget? Yeah. Stereo.
What was the original budget for that? I don't know. We're digging deep into the memory.
I'll just lean in.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess, but I think it was around $360,000, and it came in over $4. And again, I'm guessing because I'm trying to recall.
Right.
But it was short mostly because of the wiring. Before we went to bid and when we were building the budget, we reached out to a couple of the vendors we had talked to about what they thought the scope would be and how much it would cost us to build out for the K-8 schools. And they hadn't, what we heard after the fact when I said, "What?" when the bids came back, was that they hadn't anticipated the size of some of our buildings. If you think about Stratfield and McKinley being 3 levels, they hadn't anticipated that, even though we gave them drawings. So unfortunately, we had a bit of a surprise.
And the server crashing, how much does the server cost?
That server was part of a longer-term plan. We just needed to do it a little bit faster than we thought. Off the top of my head, I believe that was somewhere around $25,000. Maybe, or actually, maybe it was more than that.
No, it was more like 100.
It was more like, it was more like 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
100?
Yeah, it's part of a plan that we have in place to consolidate our servers. We did part of the project, I think it was 3 years ago for Ward, 2 years ago for Ward High School, and this is part of doing one for Ludlow. But it's a long-term plan to consolidate servers amongst all of the schools and create some redundancy. So if one high school fails, the other high school can back them up and things like that.
And we're talking one server?
Well, it's a blade server, so think of it as the difference between a mainframe and your desktop computer.
So is it one server, or is it just multiple servers that are built into like a,
It's a little bit more complex than that. It's basically, a blade server is, well, basically blades. There's multiple components that create multiple servers that are attached to a storage area network
okay?
that's expandable, so it gives us the opportunity to, spread the wealth, but only have to pay for electricity, power, and maintenance on the one device.
The only reason I'm asking is because, you hear the server went down, and we hear $100,000. And Mr. Leslie, who's going to be coming before us about a month and a half ago, when we were talking about servers and how much servers cost, was quoting numbers of $10,000 to $15,000. And so we're really talking apples and oranges.
Yeah, absolutely,
and
because there's
I guess-
so many different kinds.
Yeah, I guess when we talk about this stuff, we should probably try to figure out what we're talking about, because it just causes confusion amongst us when we hear certain things cost 100,000 and maybe it costs 10,
And it really varies depending on
Yeah.
what exactly you're talking
Sure,
about.
makes sense.
Sort of like cars.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm still trying to get over the fact that the wiring for our wireless project went over budget by $120,000.
You weren't alone in that one.
Right.
Quick question before she...
Yeah.
Did Twig in the purchasing director, I should say, was she involved in the quoting of this project, this wireless project, through the purchasing department?
You mean, was she involved in my budget build for that project?
No,
or-
was
or
she involved in getting the quotes and then ultimately
Yes,
executing a
the
PO?
The bid itself was processed through the purchasing department through the normal process. Phil Ryan, who works for Twig, actually managed the analysis of the bid and handed that documentation back to us. Ultimately, it was our decision on who we selected.
Got it, thank you.
What does the wireless project allow you to do that you couldn't do before besides connect wirelessly? I mean, what does it save us? Why was this important to go forward because,
Well, essentially, it accomplished quite a few things. Primarily, it provided, as you said, the wireless connection.
Right.
But it provided wireless that was managed and redundant. What we had done was sort of what you do at your house now. You go down to Staples and you buy a wireless router. Well, we had bought enterprise versions of those,
Yeah.
but there was no management of them per se. What we had done at the high schools about 5 years ago was put in a wireless network. So as the children roamed between the buildings with whatever district laptop they had, they could have access. If they had a smartphone on them, they could have access to the internet. And we had planned to put this project into place 4 years ago with the middle schools, and then 3 years ago with the elementary schools, and we kept postponing it because of cost and other pressures. So what we did now is we've gotten it in the middle schools and the elementary schools, which allows us to use mobile devices, which, you know, anytime you want to sit out in reception and watch the kids, they're not yakking anymore. They're all on some kind of device while their parents are copying at the PTA copier. In addition to that, it allows them to roam the building, which became very important for the middle schools, because you may have a child, for example, with an IEP who has a designated computer provided by the district to help that child succeed. If they roam the buildings previously, they'd have to re-log on, reconnect to the wireless, just like your cell phone. Sometimes it drops signal and you've got to renegotiate, like, hey, it's me, and yes, this is me, and I can connect to my wireless. Now that happens behind the scenes, so the children never have to re-log on. They log on once, and the computer knows it's a legitimate device on our network, and they can navigate to where they need to.
the only question that I have, and it's not the purview of our board here, but just in terms of the spending of funds, is that I remember when we went and spoke with the students at Ludlow, we were talking about the addition to Ludlow, and we went and had a conversation with the students at Ludlow High and all that. And I thought I remember them saying that they actually weren't allowed to use their computers in Ludlow. So I'm wondering, is the technology outpacing the policy? Do you know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. The children have been using what we call the guest network for a long time, pretty much the whole time we've had it out there. At the I assume you meant Ludlow High School?
Yeah, right, sorry.
Yes, okay. What we have now is sort of a draft policy in place where we're looking at adopting what we would call a BYOD. It's covered in our regulation now, but we're kind of taking baby steps with it. What we've given the children access to this year, and we're working with the staff to actually train them on how to use it, is an internal or external VPN network. So the kids can now, through the web, get to their drives that are the files that are saved on their building servers. Does everybody follow that one?
Yeah.
So that would be something that they would be able to do to get access to their schoolwork, whether they're home or in school, using their own personal device. We also had a couple of pilots going on with Google Apps at the high school, and we're rolling that out at the middle schools now, where they would also be using that network. The other thing to remember about is by going wireless this way, we've also eliminated the need for a lot of land drops.
Well, yeah, right.
So that helps a lot too, especially as we end up bringing more and more devices in, because we need to prepare the kids for taking the SBAC assessments that are all online now.
Thank
We have
you.
to really build out our technology infrastructure for the upcoming new statewide assessments. They're going to all be done on computers, starting in, could be as early as this spring, but for sure in spring of 15. And you have to have quite a bit of bandwidth and throughput to allow students to take the tests online. And most places are finding it's a pretty significant investment that was unanticipated when the federal government decided to change this.
Sometimes the word is unfunded.
Right, partially funded mandate. Somebody, is that Mr. Brown?
That's what I was thinking.
That's it, partially funded mandate. Also, we got a couple schools where there is very little to no what I'll call cell phone service, so that a teacher or anybody can hardly use their device there, and it burns out your battery. If you've ever been in an area where you can't get service, it's always searching for it. Ludlow High School is particularly bad. Ludlow Middle School is bad. That sort of part of town is just doesn't have good cell service, and plus you've got some of these construction of these buildings was not designed for some of this, And so we've really had to amp up some infrastructure to allow that to happen.
Any other questions, comments, concerns from board members on these items? Okay, thank you, Mr. Nash. Thank you very much, appreciate it. Appreciate you coming out tonight.
Not a problem.
All right. Item number 3, and I am going to read it this time. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Director of Public Works. Resolved that the town of Fairfield appropriate $1,300,000 towards the cost of creating a microgrid to serve the fire headquarters, police headquarters, cell phone tower at 100 Reef Road, ECC, and Operation Hope. And further resolved that the first selectman is authorized to accept and expend a grant from the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection in the amount of $1,167,659 to pay for a portion of the costs of such appropriation. The town's share of the project is to be funded from the 2013-2014 town operating budget. And further resolve that the first selectman is authorized to execute, on behalf of the town of Fairfield, any and all necessary documents to secure such a grant. Good evening,
Good evening.
Mr. Ivanchik. Please, walk us through.
Again, in the background, I try to lay it out in the 14 points, is basically
Mr.
the
Bowman.
state of Connecticut responding to the severe loss of power communications in the 3 storms we had over the last few years, try to develop a way to try and ensure that critical facilities in municipalities and state government, or in the private sector for that matter, could operate 24/7 for both heat, air conditioning, and electric power during extended outage periods. And the way they do that is through what's called the microgrid system. The microgrid is new to Connecticut, but it's not new to the rest of the world. I mean, the company we chose to basically do this operation has done hundreds of them in America as well as in Europe. And there aren't that many companies that have actually done them that are around here in the United States. So one of the critical things was to have a company that had experience in microgrids from the state's point of view. So we were approached by 4, and this is the company that was by far the most experienced. The other good thing about this company is it agreed that all the costs involved and up to this point they rolled the dice with. So if we didn't get the grant, they would have eaten those costs. Other companies required upfront payments of that, and that's about $80,000 or $50,000 that they did get paid in addition to this directly by the state because we did get the grant. So those were critical things. Again, we looked at 2 different critical facilities. Basically, one is around the sewage treatment plant and one around the police and fire headquarters. And we applied for both of them. The one around the sewage treatment plant was not successful because it's in a 100-year floodplain. We'll try and deal with that next time by getting it out of the floodplain and protecting it anyway. So this here proposal, which, what could be more critical than police, fire, emergency services, homeless shelter, and the cell phone towers, which became an issue many times especially during the blizzard, where, if the phone lines are down and you can't use your cell phone to communicate with emergency communications for fire, police, or ambulance services, what good is it? So in this case, we're trying to ensure that that cell tower will also be available 24/7 in any emergency. The town's part of this really is to take the existing emergency generator which we have there, which is we just put in a few years ago with 100% federal grant, but it's a diesel generator and make it natural gas. One of the requirements of the microgrid system is that you have to have a 30-day fuel supply. Well, we would have to have one heck of a big tank to have a 30-day fuel supply of diesel on the site, and there's no guarantee you could deliver the diesel, but the natural gas is in the street. So, and we couldn't convert it, so what we have to do is replace that diesel generator with a natural gas generator, and that's really the basic town part of this. We're looking at using that natural gas or diesel generator at other places, at one of the schools or any other building we may have a need for a generator. It won't go to waste, that's for sure. So again, most of the money on this is really electrical and technical and computer-driven to allow, when power goes off, to all these different systems to continue to function. Right now, we're also installing 2 photovoltaic systems, one on top of Operation Hope and one on top of the firehouse under a different program. And we have the existing 50 kW generator at the police station, which we're also going to be able to fine-tune up to a 60 kW generator. But when UI power goes off, those things shut down. It's called parallel operation, so that when UI power starts up, there's no backfeeding into the line, which would electrocute a lineman or something. But this allows the system to run on they call island power. It would shut it off and then turn it on when UI power goes off without any backfeed into the system. But also then the computer decides on which power is used first. The greenest power gets used first versus the other power, and which building needs it first. And it'll all be it's underground, so there's no chance of poles or wires coming down. So it's a pretty sophisticated system that way. And again, that's pretty much as much as I understand it.
Mr. Brockville? Thank you, Mr. Bowman.
Actually, thanks very much for the presentation. It sounds great. So my view on something like this is pretty simple. We're the Board of Finance here. You are an expert in this area. You and the administration have decided this is a good idea for us. You've secured the grants. So total support. And the only question I have, very simply, is financially, where could this, I'm not saying it will, where could this go wrong? In other words, right now we're being shown that we're on the hook for, you know, a certain amount of money. We're getting the grant to cover the bulk of it. What could happen that we should think about when we vote on this that could surprise us, if anything?
I mean, if it's a design build on their part, so they're responsible to make that work no matter what. I mean, so Schneider Electric is a multi-billion-dollar corporation, as you know, but if something fails there, they have to make it work. If they don't make it work, we're under no obligation to make it work. Our sole commitment is to the natural gas generator. So the worst-case scenario is the system doesn't work. We're right where we are now, but it didn't cost us anything except for the natural gas generator.
Okay, so from our point of view here, you're telling us we don't have to worry about, like, for example, we just heard from the Board of Ed that, you know, and obviously things like happen all the time. I'm not saying anything went wrong, but, you know, they planned to put in a wireless system. You were sitting here, and then it turned out that it was a more involved job than they thought, and it's going to cost some extra money. You don't, that's not an option here, or?
Not an option here for two reasons. One, as a design build, it wouldn't be allowed to happen. Two, they submitted like 60 pages here to the state of Connecticut technical backup, which was reviewed both by DEEP and by UI and approved as the, you know, the approved cost. So they
Gotcha.
cannot spend any more.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Other questions? Mr. DeWitt?
Thank you. This is good, all good backup. Thanks. So, as I understand a microgrid, power goes off. This network, this independent network, is all connected together, uses all its independent sources of energy to power the whole grid.
Correct.
Okay. So to elaborate on Mr. Brockville's question, so we just put a new generator, or we're going to put a new generator at Town Hall. Do we not need to do that now because it's on the microgrid?
Oh, no, the town hall is not on a microgrid. Just police, fire, and Operation Hope. That's only that little complex there is on the microgrid.
What about, what's the opportunity to expand? How big can the microgrid be? I mean, I see,
Well, it
I
has
see
this-
the numbers, right? And,
There has to be in physical proximity to each other, the buildings.
oh,
So if it's a
physical,
block
yeah.
away, there has to be, you know, touching each other, the properties. So that's
Oh,
what
I
it
see.
shows. At the Water Pollution Control Facility, we could do that. You know, the transfer stations for garbage, the
Yep.
yard waste site, the public works garage, all that's in that area, which we were looking to do. But they have to be physical proximity to each other.
Oh, I get it. Okay. The generator you're referring to, the diesel generator, is that the one down by on it's not One Rod Highway anymore, it's,
No, this one is right there at the police station.
oh, okay.
So there's an emergency generator on the ground on Reef Road.
Right.
And there's the TECO Gen 50 kW generator on the roof.
Oh, okay.
Which runs 24/7. The emergency generator only kicks in, you know, when power goes off. There's other backup generators too, in case this emergency generator didn't kick in.
Yeah.
There are other backup generators in the site that would kick in for it, which, you know, we didn't even discuss here, so.
Is there an opportunity to use that diesel at Town Hall?
It could be used at, I think we already bought the one, didn't we, for the, I forget about it.
Well, it's
Old Town Hall.
going to
Could
lead
be
to my
used
next,
at-
to lead to my next question about planning, right? We've known about this thing since, I don't know when this was submitted, July 23rd, right? Oh, no, this is when you got the letter, so
Yeah.
June 18th. This is what I questioned before when we talked about the town hall generator. Is there anything else going on? No, nothing. And here we are, we're going to be sitting with a nice diesel generator in the back lot, needing
Yep.
to be used somewhere else. And you're right, there's tons of places to use it, right? But
And again, no one knew we were going to get the grant either, so it was very competitive. But
No, I
think
understand
this
that.
generator is also oversized for the town hall. This is a 300, the existing generator at the police station is like 350 kW.
oh,
We
okay.
need about 200 for town hall. A bigger building like the library would be more appropriate, or one of the school buildings, the ones that
Yeah.
are very large.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah, please.
So, thank you for the explanation. I understand the microgrid. One of the key things that I didn't see in here that I was going to ask about, and Mr. DeWitt brings it up through this, is we put together a shelter at Ludlow. And I know there's backup systems there, but actually those backup systems failed, as I recall, in the last storm. There was a period of time where they were out of power or something. Is there opportunity to move that generator or to do a separate microgrid to keep Ludlow High School? Because there was a fair number of our residents that were evacuated there.
Right, there was only a 200 kW generator put there, the same size as Independence Hall. When that was put in about 14 years ago, it was really looked at as a very limited connection, and when you had the real emergency, you needed a lot more than that.
Right.
That could be there. I mean, it all depends. I'm not sure if the board doesn't have more power there now, or how that works. I mean, Dr. Todd will have to answer for that. I don't know.
I thought they had
From
a,
the emergency stuff,
yeah,
the fact was that the generator only did like half the building.
right.
Yeah, it was
And
maybe
it,
less.
and it went down at one point too, as I recall, because I was there.
It wasn't designed to cover as much space as they had intended, and I understand right now that they're working on a project to expand the ability for the generator to cover larger portions of the building. As a matter of fact, there's a test scheduled for Thursday, which is supposed to be the final test of the expansion of the supported areas. I'm not sure if that meant an upgrade to the generator or what facilities, but I know that's going on.
I think I just realized, now I'm thinking back, the generator had more capacity to serve a larger part of that building than it was connected to. So by connecting more rooms to the building, you can still use the existing generator to provide more power.
Yeah, but
Whether it's enough, I don't know. And again, we looked at this, I know the first selectman has sent a note to Dr. Tittle, or
I just want to make sure there's a
saying,
coordinated effort.
where can we use this?
Yeah, yeah. To Mr. DeWitt's point, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, just a quick question. When would this generator be freed up? When will this microgrid concept be
Microgrid
complete?
was scheduled to be, if approved on this schedule, somewhere in February of 2014.
So we'd have to get through this hurricane season, and probably nothing would happen until spring or so when they had the opportunity to put it somewhere. Can we just have a commitment that you guys are going to look at and see?
Yep.
To Mr. DeWitt's point, we don't want to approve a whole bunch of things and then realize we have extra capacity sitting around.
It just sounds like there's a lot of, we hear about generators a lot. Didn't see it as much or why.
Yeah.
Well,
Who knew?
but you know what, I mean, I was listening to something today on the radio, and they said Sandy was like the 700-year storm. They're looking in arrears, right, the storm pattern, the 700-year pattern. And I go, and I think to myself, man, the state's putting out a lot, giving us $1 million. We're just one town, right? All the money we're generating because we had the 700-year storm, right? It's mind-boggling. It seems like it's a lot of unnecessary
Well, but
precaution, if you ask me.
Except this isn't just for the 700-year storm. I mean, the blizzard did the same thing.
No, fair.
and,
Oh, I like the
Storm would do
microgrid.
the same thing.
I think the microgrid is fantastic, and I like the
Depending on
fact that
state
you're,
program.
and I like the
$16 million
photovoltaic.
state program, so.
I think the microgrid is a great idea. The photovoltaic and all, that's a great idea. It's just that,
But you're not going to plan for a 700-year storm. We can't plan for a 100-year storm.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
Okay. Do we have any other questions, Mary? We're on the,
Just to comment on what Mr. DeWitt just said, and that was, last week I attended the meeting on Penfield Pavilion, and that they told us that Sandy was a 7-year storm, and that they plan on like a 100-year storm and a 500-year storm. So just to put that a little bit in perspective.
7 years.
Oh, there's a couple of digits missing, man.
I think you're right.
changes the discussion. Mr. Walsh? Oh, Mr. Brown, then I'll go to Mr. Walsh, I'm sorry.
Just a question on the $132,000. Where is that coming from? I know that operating budget, but where?
Where's it coming from? Bob, you can,
It is not specifically in the budget as a line item. I was not in attendance at the board, so it would either have to come out of savings from operations or out of contingency.
Well, that's not what it said.
It's exactly what it says. It says from the budget.
Right.
So it's not coming out of
Mr. Walsh?
works, right?
Right.
Mr. Bowman, thank you very much for this program. It seems, once again, a very good program that you're putting together here. Just a couple of questions I have. First, the RFP proposal costs, are those really the costs of that company that we co-applied for with? Who gets that $52,000?
that, they apply for that directly. It doesn't come through the town at all. They get paid directly by the state for that.
So that's how they make their money?
Well, they make the money on the 1-3, too. They're doing the project. I mean,
Okay.
they're Square D, a lot of their equipment's going in, they're getting paid for doing that, so.
Okay, but they are,
That was the engineering and design cost,
the 52,000.
yeah, I mean, they had to do interconnection agreement with UI, which last time we did it, it cost us $20,000 just for the interconnect agreement, so there's considerable costs in there.
And the diesel generator that we're talking about decommissioning and possibly moving someplace else, and was that paid for with a federal grant?
No, we town paid for that. Federal grant was the one on the roof, the 24/7 full-time generator. The one on the emergency generator was paid for by town money.
So that's the emergency one we're talking about,
Yes.
decommissioning and moving. The one on the roof will stay there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. And when do we pay for that?
We're gonna make it bigger from 50K to 60, so.
Okay.
Any other questions? Can you walk me through the math here? Let me say what I see, and then you tell me where I'm wrong, or if I'm right. God forbid. Okay, so if I go to the memo, right, the estimated fixed cost is $1,282,657. You round it up by 17,343 and came to a total cost of 1.3.
Correct.
Is that correct? You guys never round down. Okay, so you.
Not by us, by you.
So it's 1.3 million. Then of the 1.3 million, 1,167,659 is committed by the Department of Energy,
Right.
and that comes to a total exposure of to us about 133,000.
Correct.
To which these documents indicate that 133,000 will be paid for out of the town's operating budget.
That was the vote of the Board of Selectmen, and that's the resolution that is before you.
Right.
You could change that and move it to a recurring capital item, or whatever you want.
Now, question for you.
Think.
How much, Mr. DeWitt, you might be ahead of me here, because I don't have it with me. What did we approve for our contingency this year? Is it 750,000? Huh?
2559.
2,559, but some portion of that was set aside for salaries.
Oh,
Oh, normative contingency,
don't know
I'm
the
sorry,
math, yeah.
400,000.
no, it was bigger
No,
than that,
no,
wasn't
it's
it?
250,000. It's either 250 or 400. It started out at 250, I don't know. It's
What
one
do you
of
mean,
those.
what's real contingency?
You're talking about the normative town contingencies, what you're talking about, yes or no?
I'm talking about the overall contingency for the town. There was a large number.
It's a large number. I thought then you said normative.
2.55 million.
It's 2.55, but some of that 2.55 is relative to expected settlement of contracts.
Correct.
So there's kind of a quote-unquote general contingency that was put aside.
So what specifically is your question?
What's the
How much of it's
what's the
being used
general
by the
contingency?
133? Because we're in October, or we're in... Well, that big number is okay to break down here. We don't want to get into specifics regarding
Right.
how much for each
Yeah,
contract.
and that's the
or
number I'm
anything.
saying, is either 250 or 400.
It's either 250 or 400. So if we were to approve taking this out of the operating budget, and there was not savings found within the operating budget, it would diminish the contingency account by perhaps half.
A third or a half.
That number seems just too low to me. I don't remember it being 200,000.
I thought it was,
I thought it was
Closer
like
to-
700,000 for some
Yeah.
reason.
No.
does anybody have any questions on that?
I was going to point out, the only reason we're asking for any money is the state program does not pay for capital. So any capital costs are have to pay by the town.
State program does not pay for capital.
It's pretty interesting.
So, is that saying that $1,167,000 of this is labor?
No, but it's equipment that isn't considered capital by the state. Computer equipment, for whatever reason, electronic equipment, the interconnect, the underground wiring, the controls, all that is not considered capital by the state.
So what does qualify for capital by the
Well, the
state?
generators, physical
The actual
generator.
Wow, okay. So just the generator, not computers, not the wiring, not any of that, just, not the capital, not the actual capital, this is the state-defined capital.
The state-defined capital, that's right.
And how's our state doing financially? No, I'm kidding.
Kidding.
Okay. All right. What other questions on this item? Anybody? Yes, it is. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Walsh. The item is now before us. Are there any other questions, comments on this item?
If, I'm concerned about where this is coming from, frankly, now, and especially if it's halving our contingency.
I think Mr. Mayor implied that there may be other sources of funds other than the
No,
contingency.
A lot of things get implied. Why?
I didn't imply anything, really.
Oh,
What
you said
all
from
I said was that-
you said savings other,
Well, I mean, in other words, if it is
If
the
it's got-
it's the administration's intention to manage the budget. The administration made a decision that it would attempt to manage the budget absorbing this $132,000.
with no idea where.
No, he's saying he wasn't at the meeting, so he doesn't know whether the intent was out of contingency.
No, the intent, at the meeting, it was their discussion about, where it comes, but I'm saying the administration has indicated, has made a commitment to managing the budget through the use of contingency, and if that becomes inadequate, hopefully there'd be always revenue surprises or somehow adjusting other areas of the budget to make up for it.
I hate the H word, right? Hopefully, right?
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
When do we have to come up with the money? When is this grant, I guess the grant goes to Schneider Electric, right?
Yeah, we pay them, and the state pays us.
Okay, so when do we have to pay them?
Well, they won't start work until October 1st,
In a month?
or when the money wouldn't be available until October 1st, so
Okay, but do we know when we have to pay Schneider Electric?
it'll be a monthly bill going forward, October, November, December, January, as they install it. It's a 5-month project, so it's not a long-term project.
So basically, we have a month to figure out where we're going to get the money from.
some of the money.
I know it's over 5 months, but you're not going to sit there, I don't think, once a month and say, where am I going to get $30,000 this month?
Well, actually, we have to come up with a full $1,300,000. Because we fund the project, then we submit the bills for reimbursement, then we get reimbursed. So the disbursements come out of town cash flow, town general funds, and then we get reimbursed. And according to Mr. Bowman's information and what is currently planned is that the funds will be 100% reimbursed before the end of the fiscal year.
All right, so the grant money comes to the town of Fairfield, and we're going to turn that over to Schneider Electric to do the one.
We pay Schneider Electric, then we bill the state for reimbursement.
You guys are talking the difference between cash flow and budget.
Right.
Jim, what you're saying is absolutely correct, in that the town has to find $133,000 within its operating budget, whether it's all contingency, whether it's contingency plus savings in other accounts. But whatever they need to do, they need to find 133. Actually, they need to find 115, because 17,000 of this is actually contingency on contingency. Bob's right in saying that, in theory, we're paying out the $103 million out of cash flow. 1.3 million out of cash flow over 5 months. So he's got a cash flow issue, we have a budgetary issue, right?
Yeah, the point, though, being that the town has adequate cash flow, that it doesn't need to make an immediate decision as to where the funds need to come from. We'll be analyzing the operations and looking at savings as we go forward. You know, we always encourage savings in OT and in other areas.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments?
Mary?
Mary?
I guess I'm kind of questioning that, because normally if we don't approve something, we take it right out of contingency if it's not budgeted for. So I'm not 100% sure I'm comfortable with that process. But
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bowman, let me ask a question then. You've heard a couple of comments of questions of board members here about where that additional 115 to 130,000 is going to come from. I think it's, in general, I think the board's supportive of the project. What happens if this doesn't get approved now by October 1st? What does that do in terms of us being able to do the project?
It delays things until it does get approved or rejected, one or the other.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
It delays the project until the final action is taken on it.
Okay, but do we lose the grant?
No.
Do we put anything in jeopardy?
I don't think so. I mean, we're ahead of the game. A lot of the towns haven't appropriated the money to pay for, haven't chosen a vendor yet even.
So we're ahead of the game.
Right.
And this wouldn't
But
be...
one of the things that the state does require,
Right.
the money be spent within, by January 29th. However, the state themselves, the bond commission hasn't approved the money for this and won't until September. Therefore, it'll be pushed back to March. So the commitment is to have it spent by March. So, if you push it back a month, I don't think, who knows? I don't want to answer for the state on that one.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Thank you, Mr. Bowman.
More of a comment than a question.
Please, Mr. Blackwell.
I guess I just think that, I think all the questions are good questions, but at the end of the day, our town's executive and the Board of Selectmen voted to send this to us, and they're comfortable with the funding. We have, something like a $300 million budget in our town. I think I'm a little over, but not by much. And we're talking about $130,000 that could be used out of contingency. And at the end of the day, we have contingency because we have things that are contingent, projects we want to do. And to hold up a project like this, where we've gotten over $1 million grant from the state, Mr. Bowman tells us we're not going to lose it. I assume we won't, but I just don't see the reason for us, if we're all, I don't want to presuppose everybody's opinion on the project, but if we're all in favor of the project,
Bless you.
if this was a multi-million-dollar exposure to the town and we were being told, we'll figure it out, then I think I'd be the first one to say, let's step back here. But I just think this is almost a de minimis number relative to the size of our town. And I think at some point we have to trust our first selectman and our chief fiscal officer and our board of selectmen that they can make a wise decision on a number like this and a project like this. So, just
Thank
my
you.
opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Brockfeld. Mr. Walsh?
I agree with Mr. Brockfeld. The fact that it's 130,000 and we're getting well over $1 million for free to be able to upgrade our abilities to be able to use our police, fire, and ECC and Operation Hope at times that we've seen in recent memory, not just from a 700-year storm or 7-year storm, whichever it turned out to be. But the fact that it was multiple snowstorms, things are hitting, and I would not want to be have our police and fire not have the resources they need to respond to some of these emergencies that I can only see continuing to come at some level, maybe hopefully not the level we've seen them in a recent year, but I think this would permanently upgrade our ability to be able to function as a town and have emergency services up and functioning as a town during the most desperate of times. So for $130,000, I'm willing to go forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Any other comments? Mr. Brown?
The question of the $132,000 wasn't meant to hold up the project. It was meant to be a simple question. Where's it coming from? It's not, Mr. Mayor, you with me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that, it was simple, and it's become very complicated because there really isn't an answer. The answer is, we'll let you know. I don't know what the right process is with that, but there should be a process anyway.
I hear, I mean, not to speak for
It's-
Mr. Mayor, but what I'm hearing, and maybe Mr. Mayor can speak up, is that the town hopes to find the money through maybe other savings or other items that work in our favor in our budget.
Yeah,
And if not, they'll use some of the money in our contingency account. I mean, it's not like we don't have $130,000 to spend if we needed to.
Right.
That's
Look,
just the way I'm hearing it. Maybe I'm...
no,
If I may, I mean, as I just quickly thinking through this, I guess there's 4 actions you can take, not approve the grant, delay the grant, vote along the resolution that was passed by the Board of Selectmen, or make a decision as to where you want to take it out of. And that would be out of operations, or to have it added to the non-recurring capital budget.
Mr. Walsh?
Well, there are other ways to manage that, and I'd hope the first selectman and the administration would watch how we would do this. I mean, what Mr. Tetro has shown in the past that he's done is he tells departments not to hire people, keep positions open. We did this with contingency. He had this little area of told people not to hire people in the library so that we'd have limited resources there, but that's what he did to try to manage to that budget. And I would expect him to do the exact same thing here to whatever he would have to do.
I agree with Mr. Brockfeld in terms of not holding up the project due to $133,000. I think that's very valid. However, I do think Mr. Brown raises a very good point in that this is the first time that I can actually remember an item coming before us that actually didn't have the specific, oh yes, we are definitely taking this out of contingency, we know of nothing else. What comes across, Mr. Mayor, is actually that decision might have been made at the Board of Selectmen's table, but the Chief Fiscal Officer wasn't part of that decision. So what I'm going to ask you very specifically is, we're being asked, I'm going to assume that there's no savings to be had because we just went through a horrendous budget process where we chopped down every department, we were vilified in certain areas, we were told that there was nothing left, the cupboards are bare. So do we have $133,000 in contingency to pay for this?
We have the normative contingency budget of $400,000. That's the certainty that exists. And there's nothing at this point besides this item that has been identified that would be used against that $400,000.
Okay. So this is storm preparedness, this is emergency preparedness. Sounds like it may be a decent use of contingency if we needed so, correct?
Yes, sir.
That's the way I'm reading it. I mean, I agree, though, I wish it was more spelled out here than that. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Good,
Mrs. Alvin, please.
I've been listening to the entire conversation as it's gone around the table, and there have been many very good comments and questions made and posed. I am comfortable with this resolution. If members of this board need more specificity, there could be an amendment made to it. I'm not suggesting there be one, but there could be an amendment made to it. I agree with Mr. Walsh's comments. I would expect that the First Selectman and his administration would do their utmost to fund the $132, nearly $33,000 through efficiencies and savings, even in a very austere budget. And if they are unable to do that, then pay for it out of the contingency, because this isn't a luxury. I think this is an important thing for us to have in the town. So if we were talking about spending $133,000 because we got a grant to put tennis courts in, this would be a non-issue to me. It would be hands down, go away. this is an important item to add to the town's infrastructure. And so I would prefer that they fund the 133 out of efficiencies in operations and find the savings throughout the fiscal year, and if not, pay for it out of the contingency.
Thank you, Mrs. Elman. Mr. DeWitt,
Yeah, I can't not speak.
try it.
We have an austere, yeah, I know, I should, you're right, I should try it sometimes. I couldn't agree more, I should try more. This is an austere budget. This is a to the bones, but, and you know what? We don't find efficiencies. We do exactly what Mr. Wall says. We don't hire librarians. That's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. If we have $130,000 come up new, we should be able to look in the budget and say, oh, we take it out of contingency, which is an answer, and I think that's your answer, and perfectly good answer, and I'll support it. But we should also say, hey, we were going to buy a dump truck for $140,000, maybe we don't do that. Because finding efficiencies equals in this town not hiring people and not, we don't find efficiencies, we just cut services, especially in this budget. So I'll support the resolution if it's coming out of contingency.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Any other comments?
I don't want to belabor this, but one quick, because I think it's a bigger question. When we say we're spending out of contingency for any project, you know what I'm saying? Are we implying, however, that there'll always be an effort to find a savings or another way to pay for it, and then we'll pay out of contingency? In other words, let's say we just said tonight, we want to pay for this out of contingency, and then Mr. Mayor at some point found $50,000 was being not expended for whatever reason. Wouldn't almost by definition that 50,000, you know, it's really only, it's just fungible money. I mean,
No, I mean, no, I actually don't agree with you on that. I think
it's a question, not a statement.
Yeah,
That's why they
yeah.
call it a budget.
No, I mean, we have in fact, through the years, voted to actually spend, you know, contingency money on items such as this, typically later in the year, as I recall, when we knew, you know, how that contingency was going to be used. The difference here is we're just into the new year.
Right.
I think it's, quite frankly, I think good management would always imply you're going to try to beat your budget. I don't know
I
of
guess
any
that's what I'm saying,
organization.
yeah.
Yeah, but that is, in my view, separate from this. This is, quite honestly, and Mr. Brown brought it up, this is one of the few times where it's not specifically identified as we're paying for it out of contingency. This is, we're paying for it out of the operating budget. It could be just nomenclature here, but in the past, it has been, you know, out of contingency.
Well, would there be a reason to make a motion to amend it to say that it's coming out of contingency? This way,
that's
the
where I was
administration now knows that they only have $270,000 to play with out of contingency?
I mean-
if that's the way we've done it in the past.
Most certainly, we could. I'll speak for myself personally. I'm fine with the language as it is, because it's an amount of money that is small enough, so I don't need that amendment to support this. And certainly this, you know, but I could support it either way. That's my own personal opinion.
I can't remember ever supporting language like this.
I agree.
That comes from just the town operating budget. We've always transferred money from specific budgets with department heads' approval out of their budget to pay for something, and we've done that throughout the year, not just at the end of the year. We
I
do
agree.
it as it comes along.
We haven't
And so
done that in a long time, but you're right.
But, right, but that's how it's traditionally been done, and that's how I think it should be done, because otherwise, if no one knows this money's coming out of their budget, they're gonna spend their budget that we gave them.
So, do we have an amendment to pose on this?
I don't know. That's what my question is was the intent to take it out of contingency, or are the funds available in public works?
We have as
or
much- yeah,
police
we-
and fire?
We have as much information as we're going to have to answer it, which is basically what Mr. Mayor knows and what's written before us. We do not have anything separate from that, right?
I
And I'm not discounting the question, I'm just saying I think we have all the information we're going to get on this.
Yeah, and certainly, it's very easy to change the resolution, just basically strike two words and
Right.
add the contingency fund to replace the operating budget.
So does somebody have a motion they would like to make on that?
I'll make it.
Okay. Mr. Walsh, can you?
Well, I'll
State
take
it.
out, after the number 2014, withdraw town operating budget and replace it with the town contingency account. Or just put contingency account where operating budget is.
Town contingency account. Do I have a second to that motion? I'll go with Mr. Brown. That amendment is now before us. Any comments, questions on that amendment? Okay. All in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Mr. Stone, exception. Yeah. Abstentions. Okay, so the item is now before us as amended. And the item before us, and I will read it this time to make sure, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Director of Public Works. Resolved that the town of Fairfield appropriate $1.3 million towards the cost of creating a microgrid to serve the fire headquarters, police headquarters, the cell phone tower at 100 Reef Road, ECC, and Operation Hope. And further resolved that the first selectman is authorized to accept and expend a grant from the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection in the amount of $1,167,659 to pay for a portion of the cost of such appropriation. The town's share of this project is to be funded from the current 2013-2014 town contingency account. And further resolved that the first selectman is authorized to execute on behalf of the town of Fairfield any and all necessary document to secure such grant. Any other comments, questions, concern from board members? Seeing none, all in favor of this item as amended? Those opposed, abstention, the item carries. Mr. Bowman, thank you very much for your good work on this, and best of luck. And we expect the $17,000 back. All right. To hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer to transfer $100,000 from account IT contingency, separate from the other contingency account, correct? Yes, sir. To IT fees and professional services. I will turn it over to the Chief Fiscal Officer and the Head of IT, Mr. Leslie. Good evening.
Good evening. During the budget process, there were, as you all know, a series of questions that IT was not able to respond to the board's satisfaction. The main questions were, what does the IT department spend its budget on, and what are the current plans, if any, for future IT initiatives? Don has prepared a short presentation that should answer these questions. He will start by presenting his budget addressed by operating function versus the normal budget format, as this seems to be a good way to succinctly explain what the dollars are spent on. Also, Ms. Burns is here, is present to discuss the Munis Cloud initiatives, if you wish, as there were some questions surrounding that activity as well during the budget process. And with that, I turn the table over to Mr. Leslie.
Thank you.
I'd like to run through the document you got that starts with budget by operational format. And one thing I will point out is communication is not the communication line item, it's communications in general. And it has stayed the same, and the one point about that was added to it that's not matching the regular communication line item is the IT department backup by Net Synergy, which is they both do LAN communications for us, plus they also do PC and server backup, so it's sort of a joint thing, but it was put into communications because it's a significant part of the situation. You'll see that its communications sits at $402,000 for the year before and $402,000 this year, hasn't changed. If you go to page 2,
Just a quick question.
Sure.
The 1.585018, we don't have the new budget books yet. Is that the total approved IT budget?
no, on the bottom, the 1619018.
Oh, got it. Okay, thanks.
Okay. And the difference there is we're just pointing out what were new initiatives.
So this ties to the budget book, I guess, is what,
It does tie to the budget book.
okay. Thank you.
One point, Don didn't mention it, but this is, as you notice, the title there is Current Operations. So items 1 through 6 is basically items broken down into those 6 categories, because the number 5 is missing.
Sorry about that.
That has been, there's nothing new The point there being, there's no new initiatives, no new contracts, no anything. There is new contracts, but exchanging for current activities, current operational activities. So 1 through 7, X5 is current operational activities, and then the stuff that is new that's in the budget is numbered 8. Item number 7, numbered 8.
Thank you.
So moving down to item number 2, the software, that's where we got the big change. And if you look at page 2 on software, there's a brief summary there of what the changes were from the budget, not the budget items. So you'll see the first one is, and that's why Ms. Burns is here if needed, is the Munis software change. And then this is just the IT budget, not the school part, so that's why it says half there. The school side is doing the same amount.
I'm sorry, how do we tie this together? It says total changes. What am I tying? When I looked at this earlier, I had troubles figuring out what this ties to.
Okay, if you take the fiscal year 13 approved and you take the fiscal year 14 approved, those are the numbers we're working with.
Yep.
And then if you go to the second page with the summaries, one of the items in the budget was the Munis. So on the changes page, you'll see the actual line items within the different spots. All right?
Okay, but what I'm trying to do is I look at software on summary of budget changes, and the total is 183,000.
Right.
I look at software on budget by operational format, and the difference is 173,000. So it doesn't tie. I look at web, and it says the difference is 8,000. I got it. I see where the
The 24 to
2410 go.
34,000 came out of the 170.
Right. So the one that doesn't tie is $9,000 in software. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So the equipment ties, right?
Right.
The 8,000 ties, if I back out the 24 and the 10. So it's just,
I think the numbers, I think it is supposed to be 173. I think there's just a $10,000 addition error in the software number for 183. It's 110 plus 50
right?
equals 160, 172, 173.
Right. Second page adds to
Second,
173.
173, not 183.
So I take it this
Oh.
wasn't done in Excel, right?
This is version 25. It was done, and I made a mistake there.
That's the difference. That ties now.
500 off, but I'm not going to argue about
Yeah.
$500.
Rounding.
Right, and then and then payroll, that's the 542. Okay, that's not total change. At the bottom, the total changes isn't total changes, that's total payroll change. See what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yes.
Okay. That was confusing. So you give numbers to an accountant, look what happens. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
All right. Thank you.
everybody. Moving on.
Yeah.
The equipment part, when I first brought my request in front of the first selectman, we discussed items and stuff, and one of them was equipment, and so we cut $80,000 from equipment in the beginning, and then you made an adjustment of $28,000 in my budget, and they were in capital, maintenance, repair, and special department supplies. That's what this equipment is talking about, because, I'm getting new PCs and monitors, new servers. I need repair parts for broken computers and for broken servers, and I just spent like $130 for 3 small batteries, which I find amazing. And so that's how the equipment fell out. Basically what I'm trying to point out here is we were trying to save money in my budget, trying to keep it as low as possible, but I felt the need for some equipment, and we're pushing our PC recycle, not our PC refresh rate. We're actually pushing it out even farther now. We tried to stay with a 4-year, and at this point we were at a 5-year, and we're actually probably going to end up with a 6-year recycle plan. That's that. The web, we have ongoing maintenance, and then we have the 2 new items there shown in the web for the Q Alert system, which is the resident, to hook the residents to the town in a more efficient way, to make it easy for them to ask questions and have it directed to the right person versus playing phone tag or not getting an answer or just getting stuck in voicemail or whatever. And it'll help with workflow and accountability to make sure that things do get answered properly. The other point there is the conversion of the police and fire website into the town website so that we get the same look and feel and that things work consistently, so that their meeting minutes and stuff like that are in with the regular meeting minutes and that type of thing.
Those two, let me ask you a question, just so we can, so those 2 items, though, does anybody mind, I'm sorry, if I, okay. So those 2 initiatives are already included in your budget, though, correct?
Yes, they are in the budget.
Okay, so,
But we just wanted to show you here the fact that I'm basically keeping things running. The only really new piece here is those 2 items.
right, so those are the new pieces. If I go to your initiatives here, though, right, on the page that's titled Initiatives,
Right.
the only 2 initiatives that are actually funded right now are what you refer to as current projects, correct?
Right. Well, I mean, yes.
Webb and Munis. The proposed projects are not funded right now, correct?
Right. That's, you asked, say, well, what are my future plans? Well, I really
Right.
don't have much money to do future planning. I mean, these future plans are actually coming out of the waterfall capital non-recurring situation, but I wanted you to know that, as much as I can't really do much, these are the things we see for the future.
Okay. So now you're asking for $100,000 to be transferred tonight so that you can spend it, correct?
Yes, to put it back where it belongs, because you took it out saying we didn't understand what you were talking about, so you wanted me to come back and explain better what was going on and why I needed it. These discussions here, besides just, the money for the discussion here includes the $100,000 in the fees and professionals. If I don't get that, then we go to the last page.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, with the fan blowing back there when I walked back in, you can't hear any of this conversation back there.
Okay. Can we make sure that we use the microphones? I'm going to assume that includes me, so let's make sure we include the microphones. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for letting us know. But go ahead, and just make sure you speak into the microphone. Okay, so before us tonight, basically what you were just doing is, first of all, the recast of the budget and operational format is great. Thank you for that. Second of all, you were saying these are the changes year over year in the, it's more detail behind the operational format changes, correct? Once it's tied together. Third, this shows that it ties to the budget book,
Yes.
correct? So this one shows the top 2 projects are actually funded, and the bottom 3 are things we've discussed in the past. You're bringing them up now and saying they're still not funded, correct?
Right, they're going to come before you for the capital planning workshop?
Workshop in a couple weeks.
Right.
3 weeks, great.
Yeah.
And then, I guess, is this item, these are the items that we're actually being asked to vote on tonight?
The last page? Page 5?
Yeah.
No, this is,
That's a yes.
oh, okay.
Wow.
Let's take those.
Okay, so page 5, which totals $98,000, is saying that we want to buy laptops, printers, and PC monitors, right?
Correct.
And that's, so we're being asked to move $100,000 from the IT contingency account into, forgive me,
Fees and professional services.
fees and professional services, and that's the appropriate place to charge these type of services, or these type of purchases?
What he's saying is that if, given his budget, his 1 point whatever million budget it is, given the need to maintain Munis, QDS, LEAS, ACS, COGZ, all of those items, all the software, pay the warranties, manage the communications, manage the LAN network, manage the Wi-Fi network, where he would have to take the $100,000 is out of equipment, looking at the department budget as a whole, these, in his order of priority, 25.5 from equipment, 21 from, for equipment laptops, 21 from printers, and 52.50 from the PC monitors. And then he has 3 paragraphs there where, if you look at, I'll just go through them, what the hell.
Yeah, no, I get
Yeah,
that. What I'm
yeah.
trying to get, I'm sorry to cut you off, I didn't mean to do that. I'm trying to understand, we're being asked to transfer it from one budget line to another budget line. Basically, it's $100,000 that you want to buy stuff, laptops, printers, PC monitors.
No, let me, the truth of the matter was, you sit there and you said, we didn't understand what you're doing, Mr. Leslie. We're taking $100,000 out of fees and professional services.
Okay.
And we're putting it into contingency.
Right.
But Mr. Walsh has the habit of saying, well, if we didn't give you your money in your budget, what would you do? This is what I'd do, because I need to pay for the maintenance, I need to pay for the Munis, I need to pay for the software.
I think I can explain this a little bit differently. When the motion was made to put the money in, to take the $100,000 and put it into contingency,
Yeah.
it wasn't specific, there was no specific delineation as to, okay, what would you really save money on? And basically, so as a budget convenience, it all came out of fees and contingencies. Okay? But the budget items that are in fees and contingencies pretty much need to be spent to maintain the current operations, the current software, pay for the software warranties, the hardware warranties, et cetera, et cetera.
So this is the stuff that doesn't get done.
Correct.
Okay.
Does that include going to this proposed change to the Munis technology support?
The going to Munis Technology Support actually saves us about 200, combined town, Board of Ed, saves us about $150,000.
But that's plowing ahead with that program.
We're going to plow ahead with that program anyway, because it's...
Regardless of what we
Because it'll
said.
cost us more if we don't. The budget would have been higher if that was not in the budget.
Why? Because those technology purchases are not till next year. Are they in this year's budget, Bob?
I got you, Chris, I'll get you.
Are those technology purchases that you
I'm
build
not
into that
sure what you're talking
$250,000 savings, are they in
The
this
Munis
budget?
SAS is in this year's budget. The items that would have to be purchased if we didn't do SAS, which would cost more than doing SAS, are not in the budget. So basically, if the town were not to do SAS, we'd have to spend more money.
Okay, so let's stick to our knitting here for a second. This $100,000 that we're requested has nothing to do with Munis.
That's a correct statement.
Fine. Let's handle the Munis thing. I understand where you're going. Let's do that separate from the 100,000 since it's laid out here. Okay? Mr. DeWitt, did you have a question on the 100,000?
I wanted to take us back in time just a little bit, because what was supplied to us during budget time was a very detailed breakdown of fees and professional services, all the other subcategories here, special department supplies, all the stuff, right?
Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone on the board. We knew exactly what you wanted to spend $383,500 on. We didn't know how you were going to spend it. The problem was, we were looking for a plan, an IT infrastructure plan, because we were faced with a big laundry list of stuff. There's about 20 things on here that all tallied it, and the discussions were, some of this is contracts, costs, this is warranty. So what we did is we we said, listen, there's about $100,000 of this 383,500 that seems like it could be better defined later. Better defined in execution, not better defined in dollars. And that's why we moved it over. So I think what you're saying is, if we don't move your money back, you're going to take out what's already in your budget for capital outlay, and those three numbers exactly as it's laid out here. You'll not buy that to execute the other $100,000, which all we wanted to know was how you were going to execute the $100,000. Is that how everyone else recollects that $100,000?
I think that's very well said, Mr. DeWitt.
And I think what Mr. Leslie's trying to say is that the money he's spending is to be, for example, well, the money he's spending is required to be spent to maintain all the current licenses, to maintain all the current warranties, to maintain all the current services. So none of the money that is spent has to do with any future initiatives or plans. All the money budgeted in that fees and service line item is for current operations, continuation of current operations. If you would choose, if the budget is cut $100,000, if you chose to cut the $100,000 out of fees and services, one of the things you might do is not pay for a warranty for one of your software programs, which if it went down, you know, the tax collector's operation or the assessor's operation or if it's Munis, the town operations would come to a halt.
Completely get it, right? But we never, believe me, we debated it, just taking that $100,000 out and sticking it somewhere else, but we made the decision as a board to leave it in your budget just so we could move this pretty freely, right, once we had an explanation. Now, the web, as per this data supplied in the budget, Web 311 and Munis total $189,000. And your budget is $283,500. So I'm doing quick math in public, which isn't good. So you've got like $94,000 left in that budget to execute licenses or whatever. And there's a whole list of them here. I get it. To execute them all, you need $100,000. All I think we asked for was, what's the plan, the IT infrastructure total plan to buy the right licenses and get the right warranties and spend $100,000. I don't think it was ever the intent for us to take it away from you. It wasn't punitive. It was just like, once we get this plan, we're glad to hand it back over to you because you're the expert.
Right. My point is, the plan is basically page 5. We're because of the tight times and the economic conditions, we're keeping the budget tight. We're not.
But your page 5 is saying, listen, if you don't give me $100,000,
I'm still going to do all this other stuff.
Yeah, I'm just not going to do this other stuff, which is
I'm doing it
capital.
because I see the need to do it. If we don't pay for software maintenance and warranties and stuff like that, we'll go out of warranty. If we have a problem, then we're going to sit there and be spending a lot more money in the future because we didn't have this stuff. I mean,
No, but to Mr. DeWitt's point, it sounds like a little bit of a different story than we got back during the budget side, right? Because it sounded like there was more being spent in fees and professional services on the budget side in order to do new and different things, not just to keep operations up and running. Now it's saying, hey, I need that $100,000 to just keep us status quo operations up and running.
Right, it's almost,
Thanks.
it's almost, right, now it's appearing to be just sustainment, just to keep us floating.
yes.
We're not even, we're just floating, we're just barely bailing, we need that $100,000. Where before, because we didn't have a plan, it was like, well, this is an enhancement, right? So, I still feel, again, and I don't want to sway, I still feel like I'm not there from the budget with the $100,000, just me. I mean, I defer to your expertise that we need this stuff, but if you take this total list that you gave us, which was an excellent list, telling a big number, just say, hey, here's the 10 or 20 or 5 things that I'm not going to be able to do if you don't give me back if you don't transfer my $100,000 back, because it's yours, it's in your budget, right? And how that makes it into the overall IT plan, I think that kind of gets me there, but.
I don't quite understand what you're saying, but I'm trying. It sounds like you're saying, if you take the 100,000 out of fees and services, what would you not do? And what Mr. Leslie is saying is, I cannot take the 100,000 out of fees and services without jeopardizing current operational activities for the current town departmental operations.
That
And so-
sounds like
and that-
exactly what he's saying, and that is a different conversation than what I recall from the budget season. That's
Yeah,
all
I'm
we're
not
trying to say.
referencing the budget season. I'm just referencing what is being.
I know this is a
understand.
mulligan, but I'm
Right.
just trying to.
Right.
It's a
Right.
substantial
I
mulligan.
can't
'cause
reconcile the two. I didn't look at, I was not. I will not.
Because one of the things included in that number in the budget season was $60,000 towards Munis.
Right, that was a big garble, and then the clear.
Now I'm
thing-
feeling better, thank you.
No, it was. And and I remember that conversation quite well. I sat here very frustratingly. The Munis, right. The bottom line on the Munis operation, which Ms. Burns is here to discuss if you would like, the bottom line is, which was totally unclear, I remember it well, Mr. Leslie made it sound like going to Munis is going to cost us more money. He said it, actually. He didn't make it sound like, he stated it. Okay? Whereas the reality is, going to Munis, we're Munis, going to the cloud to support Munis. Whereas the reality is, going to the cloud, short-term, saves us money, and over the 5-year life, I don't know how much it saves us, but saves us money this year because of we eliminate certain Munis warranty licensing agreements. We eliminate certain disaster recovery expenditures, and we eliminate the need to acquire certain servers. As we were talking about earlier, servers can run from 10,000 to whatever thousand. Certain servers to manage the Munis ourselves. So we eliminate those expenses. The total of the expenses being eliminated, the expenditures being eliminated, is greater than the new cost of the SAS program.
Why is it $60,000?
Because the Munis is $60,000 more, but had it not been in there, the Munis would not have been $60,000 more, but the equipment would have been $150,000 more.
So it's cost avoidance.
Yes, sir.
Exactly, that's the right word.
Yes.
You have a budget line of $283,500 on IT and fees and professional services. I'm convinced on Munis. You take this list that equaled 385, and you go spend today $283,500, and we're perfectly fine with it because that's the budget. It's the only thing that moving $100,000 from IT contingency back into there will give you is whatever things in here you're not going to do with the 283.5. Page 5, all page 5 says is we need printers, we need laptops, we need PCs. Great. That stuff's all funded. It's all funded. Capital outlay. That is
Chris, you're
funded.
totally missing the point. Let me
don't
try to
think
be
I
really
am.
clear. No, you totally are. Let me try to explain it. I'm not explaining it well.
Yeah,
I'm not either.
Chris,
I don't know.
yeah. Let Chris finish, and then you can talk, Bob.
Oh, I think I'm finished, but there's
Well, you
the
jumped in on him, so I
laptop, the
wasn't sure.
printers, and the PCs are funded in capital outlay. Go spend it tomorrow. Web, PD, and 311 and Munis, and another $93,500, go spend it. The only thing you can't spend today of this very detailed list you gave us is $100,000 worth of fire reporting software and tax collector software and software, solid waste scale house stuff. That's the only thing you can't go spend money on.
What I'm saying in the budget here is, I'd like to sort of get back to Mr. Walsh's normal comment every single time during the budget cycle, is we'd come up here, we'd do our discussion, and then Mr. Walsh would come around and say, well, if you didn't have this money, or if you didn't have something, what would you do? I feel that the fees and professional services, these softwares, the Munis, the 311, the 10, are important, needed. The Munis saves us money over the long term.
Funded. Go spend
No,
it.
but just listen.
It's in your budget.
Hear me out. Point being is, you always say, well, maybe I shouldn't have even included page 5 and we wouldn't be having this discussion, but it was a normal routine for the budget discussion for Mr. Walsh to say, well, where are you going to do it? What I'm saying here is, the fees and professional service, I need the $100,000 in fees and professional service. So if you weren't going to give it to me, I'd say, take the $100,000 out of this line item, but that means we can't do anything. We're not going to be improving our, I was talking about a 5 or 6 year cycle. We'd be out to 8-year cycle. I mean, how old are your PCs at home, I mean, is your PC more than 4 years old? I've got PCs that are 5 and 6 years old.
Let me just show,
I understand what you're saying.
Chris,
just so you understand what I'm looking at, right? That's the list that makes up 383.5, right?
Right, I saw it over here.
Okay, oh, you have it.
Yeah.
So everything on here up to 283.5 is funded.
Right.
But there's nothing there that we can't fund.
Chris,
is
can
what
I
I'm
take
saying.
Tom, do you mind if I take a small
Please.
crack? I
Yeah.
think I understand what you guys are saying, and I think I'm going to say what Bob's going to say, but I'll say it, if it's okay with Bob. Chris, I think what the problem here is that in our budget hearings, we were, and I don't want to use don't take this word the wrong way, we were kind of suspicious of that 383 number, right? There were things in there that we weren't comfortable with, or we didn't understand how they were being described, or whatever it may be. I'm trying to remember this the best I can. So we held back $100,000, right, until we got a better description. What I think Mr. Leslie is saying, and don't let me speak for you, is that he's going to spend that 383 the way it was presented, because he thinks it's absolutely critical. So if he doesn't get the 100, he's not going to do what you want, which is to hold back 100 from the 383. He's going to go find another $100,000 worth of stuff to not spend it on, so he can spend the 383. I'm not trying to make it sound sinister.
No, that's it.
That's exactly what I'm hearing.
Right,
Yes.
that's exactly what I'm hearing. And so I think you guys are, it's not,
No, it's fine. No,
yeah, so
no,
just so you understand.
I'm there.
Yeah, right.
Your budget is there. The only thing we needed to take that 100,000 and move it one line up was a plan.
Okay. And
That's, right? Am I alone in this discussion?
No, you're not. No.
If I am, I'll just sit back.
No, you're absolutely right. I think there's a couple things here. One of the reasons we got to the 100, one of the big items of the 100 was we had no concept of munis, right? Of what benefits we were going to get by that. So if you take the 100 and you say 60,000 of it is munis, right?
Right.
And you're saying, and I'd like Nancy to come on forward on this, you're saying that we're going to actually save money
Yes,
by doing it
over the long term, yes.
over the long term, or this year, or what?
You can either look at 3 years or you can look at 5 years. Either way, we'll be saving money. And we've avoided costs this year, and there would have been costs this year that was not put in the budget because we put in the budget the Munis stuff, cost avoidance.
There were a number of reasons why we came up with the suggestion of going to as Bob put it, a cloud service with Munis. First off, I have to let you know that when we first entertained going with the first contract with Munis, this was not an option presented to us. It was roughly 2008, 2009. As you all know, the world of technology changes pretty fast, so just want to make that clear. So the town invested a lot of money in equipment, servers, for our favorite, how do you describe a server, as well as the disaster recovery equipment that we put up with Burr. All of that stuff requires licensing and maintenance. In addition to what we pay Munis every year for using their software and getting updates and fixes to their software as the years go by. So I found out about the fact that they had this software as a service opportunity and knew we were getting close to the end of the 5-year period for our hardware, both used in production and in the disaster recovery environment. And last August, before we had Storm Sandy and the snowstorm and all that other fun stuff we did last year, started investigating what the cost-benefit analysis would be. It was slightly more expensive, but then I started analyzing it. In addition to the savings over a longer period of time in capital investment costs that we would no longer be required to invest in, we also had the experience of our wonderfully designed putting the disaster recovery at Burr because it was out of the floodplain, not realizing what the trees up there were going to do to us and trying to get access to the building. So in both Irene and Sandy, we were very concerned that trying to get anybody to Burr Elementary School, which was our DR site, was safe from water, but also very challenging environment for us to get to. We started rethinking how we were handling DR. We thought about putting it at Woods the library, because Don's investing in a DR site at the library, but felt there really wasn't enough. Huh?
Which library?
The Woods, the branch?
Woods Branch.
Okay, that's the stuff downstairs?
Yes.
Okay.
So we had some concerns.
Next to the sump pump.
Right, no one told me about the sump pump, and I asked all around. Another spot was going to be Station 5, but they didn't have other things
We
there,
joke,
too.
he got the sump pump and I got the trees, you know.
Yeah,
that's what I
exactly,
planned.
right, exactly.
So in negotiating with Munis about the costs, we started looking at all of the costs that the current we hosted version of Munis cost us. We have virtualized it. So we are paying a company called VMware for the annual ability to use those licenses. We pay Munis for the access to their system. We have to pay maintenance fees, electrical costs. And we have our own people, our engineering staff, spend a lot of time tweaking, massaging, adjusting the application and the servers that the application runs on. And, as you well know, this building loses power quite frequently when we have storms or other enterprises, and that's been somewhat of a disadvantage to the town. So we did a 5-year analysis. If we projected out the capital costs and we projected out all these other costs and compared it to the increased annual fee to Munis, where would we end up? And it turned out to be mostly a break-even proposition. We might save maybe $5,000 or $10,000, but that's on direct costs. The indirect cost savings is probably much more substantial to that when you talk about our engineering time, our people time, and the peace of mind that we have that Munis would be hosting this up in Maine. If there was a disaster in Connecticut, they could drive paychecks down here, they would mail stuff from up there, they can recreate their environment in their redundant centers across the country, because it is a nationally used program. So it provided a level of safety that we can't do ourselves. So it kind of turned into a no-brainer.
Plus enhanced services in the sense that if there is a storm and we could actually be working from our homes and not have to go to, the accounting people could work from home.
You
So
guys
that's
could look
another
at the
advantage.
budget from home. How exciting.
Okay. So that's 60 of the 100. What's the other 40? It was part of it. Yeah. Munis was part of the cut.
You
right now in your 283. Right?
Right,
$155,000.
right.
It was a 60,000 increase.
Right.
Yeah,
that was the
it was the
change.
increase that was cut.
155. Web Q311,
Right.
Web QFD and FD in Munis equal
Right, but it was moving-
$189,000, and that money remained in the $283,500.
It was
is-
moving it to the cloud that was cut, right?
No.
The 60,000?
No. No.
That's what I
It wasn't
remember.
cut. The $383,500 as presented to us is there in its entirety. It's just in two pieces, 283.5 and 100. If we move the 100 back to 380 through to fees and professional services, he gets everything on this list.
Yeah,
That's a correct statement.
that's a correct statement.
Totally correct.
So Munis is funded. I don't know what we're talking about. The 100,000 is some other subset of all these other warranties and stuff. That's
No,
we-
what they're asking
no.
us to do is transfer
I'm with you.
100 to the fees and professional services.
Right.
To
And
more
we
Or if
asked,
you'll just let me use 100,000, you can leave it there and I'll use it for
Chris,
that.
Chris, what he's saying is,
That's why contingency.
what he's saying is, regardless of what we say here tonight, he's spending the 383. What he's saying is, if you don't allow him to spend the 100,000 by transferring it from fees and to fees and professional services, he's cutting 100,000 in hardware purchases.
I get it. I'm just trying to take us back to why we moved 100 out. And that
Okay.
was because
We-
all we needed was a plan.
Right, and so now what he's saying, and what Nancy's saying is, at least as it comes to Munis. They're now giving us the rationale behind the $60,000 incremental.
Yes.
So that would leave out of the 100, that's 60, so now there's 40. So I'm saying, to your point, what's the plan for that other 40?
Okay.
You see, that's what I'm trying to get to, that's
Let
what,
me give it a...
We're cherry picking the one thing that has absolute visibility that we've all agreed on already. It's the $55,500 of warranty that we couldn't agree on.
Can I interject something? I think using the term warranty is one of the things that's causing you difficulty. The majority of this account, as Don shared the details with me, are maintenance agreements for software that's licensed by the IT department on behalf of other departments who actually use that software.
Yeah.
Can I take a look? 'Cause
Yeah, I'm just reading off the sheet.
sometimes it's just the way it's written.
Chris, I do, while she's looking, I do think that the 100, which wasn't actually a hard, we didn't actually line item it, but I think that the 60 additional towards Munis was one of the things we were concerned about.
it is.
I'm just confirming.
Just gonna
So I
talk
think,
about
I think we're all talking semantics here, but I do believe that of the comfort issues, there's no question that the 60 increase was something we were saying, hey, we don't understand this, we'd like you to come back and be a little more specific, et cetera. So I think what Tom's trying to say, which I think I agree with, is that we've now psychologically cleared the 60 off the deck.
Yeah.
And so if we have questions about their transparency, it's on 40. Now, I don't exactly know what the 40 is per se.
Exactly.
Right, I'm not sure there is a 40, by the way. I think that 100 wasn't exactly,
It was the 60 plus the
Yeah.
34,000 for the two new initiatives of the web. And so it was 60 and 34, and you rounded up to 100.
So are you prepared to give us a one-paragraph explanation as to why we should be comfortable with that 34,000? More comfortable?
You have the Q Alert handout that was sent to you?
Yep.
We have it, but we'd like to hear you.
That's the one, that's the piece of software that's for the hooking the residents to the town to get a good, basically, it's an email workflow system, and, person out and, you're sitting at home and you want to hop on the town and say, listen, the tree fell on my property and it's your tree and you guys got to cut it down. You can send an email in to the tree warden, and it would go right to the tree warden or his designee, and he would have it in a queue of, trouble ticket type of thing of, hey, this resident has this issue, what are you guys going to do about it? He could sit there and mail back the person directly because he's now got their email address. He doesn't have to call him, he doesn't have to play phone tag, and he can sit there and, give an answer saying, hey, no, it's actually on your property, you owe us money, or whatever the case may be, or we'll cut half of it, and the part that's on your property, you got to take, that type of an example. Or if you see a pothole, you can sit there and say, hey, there's a pothole, you'd be able to pick it out of a list type of thing and send it to the DPW and get it right to the person that's supposed to get it, versus all this foam tag stuff. And it goes into the queue so that it doesn't get lost, so the first selectman can see how services are running in the town from a resident's point of view of those questions or whatever.
So what's the, I'm sorry to interrupt you, what's the advantage, I could see what you're saying. What's the advantage to what you're describing to simply having on our website a listing of all the department heads and their emails so that people can simply email the department head and say, hey, the tree.
Because you wouldn't necessarily get to the right person.
Well, I'll interject on that one. I just happened to, I'm sorry.
No.
I happened to read an article about New York's 311 system, which is what this is a replicant of. And what it provides you with, in addition to what Don's described, is the data analysis tools. Where are there trends of certain things happening? The different department heads can take a look at, where do I have a lot of trees falling? Was there some connection with a development, for example? Or what was the trend for sewer, remember the sewer lines are not, the rain, where the rain goes, what do they call those pipes? Drain pipes, thank you. There was all that backup with the drain pipes a number of years ago. So there would be, somebody starts talking about flooding and they start seeing where the neighborhoods are and they can act upon that. Anecdotally, you remember the maple syrup smell that some of the boroughs were reporting in New York a couple of years ago? It was all over the radio. Well, using the 311 system and the complaints that came through on it, they were able to track based on weather patterns, where the source of that odor was coming from, and they were able to mitigate it. So it puts a lot of good tools in the hands of the administration to be much more effective, as well as much more proactive and reactive to our constituencies.
So Chris, does that sort of answer, I'm just asking, does that sort of answer your question and total up to 100,000?
I'm done.
It does or doesn't?
Does not. That's not what I thought the intent of the 100,000 was, but.
I can speak back to the list if you want me to.
I was sold on Munis for 155,000 the first day he pitched it. I get it.
Okay.
The 100,000, in my eyes, wasn't put aside because of the $60,000 Munis increase. So.
Let's go back to Munis for a second, because we do have some documentation on that. So what I meant to imply with the 60,000 was I understood it, not that it had necessarily cleared. I was just trying to get to the 100. Okay? So, Mr. Walsh, I think you had some comments on Munis.
Yeah, I just don't exactly understand the cost-benefit analysis, and I guess I was looking for some clarity on that, because it's a $305,772.97 cost per year, correct?
That was the original number. I think it changed a little bit since this was done, because, is this live?
I don't know, are we on? Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Sure. Is that better for you? All right.
What I was saying was that original number was what I wrote back during the budget season, and Mr. Mayor was able to negotiate some savings on that overall number.
So it's
as
no
we've
longer
progressed.
it's no longer the $305,000.
It's a little bit less than that now.
How much less? Bob? What did you negotiate?
I think the 3-year savings was $80,000. Is that what you calculated, Don?
Hang on, I can pull up the number.
And is there a reason why the new number didn't make it into tonight's stuff?
The annual fee now is $298,978.
$298.
Oh, sorry, I'll take that back again. Yeah, there was another discount I didn't see. Sorry, the print is rather small, and my eyesight is not great this time of night. $286,978. And we were already paying Munis just shy of $200,000, about $193,000. And if I recall correctly, the current contract pre this one had a 5% escalator in it annually.
And the current contract has what in it? A 5% escalator?
5% escalator.
In the new 3-year contract that you
This
guys
is in the
are-
original contract that we are still in force in, because we haven't moved to this hosted services.
Sure. So the $192,976 would go up 5%?
Yes,
A
annually.
year? Okay. What about the contract that you have for this new revised number of $286,978? Is that flat for 3 years?
No.
Is there an escalator in there?
There's an escalator, but I think they actually put out the numbers. You looked at that part, do you know where it is?
We're talking the ISP one?
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Go for it.
We went through 3 revisions of the Munis contract. On August 20th, 2012, the number was $319,453.
Well, that was the quote, but then they
That was the
discounted it.
original quote.
Yeah, I don't need the original quote. I guess I'm just trying to cut to the chase. With the $286,978,000 cost, that's a year 1, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Is there escalator, some type of percentage where it goes up over time, or are we fixed at that number for the next 3 or how many years?
It's this one.
Yeah, I think it goes up by about 5% a year.
So it's pretty much the same 5% that the previous agreement went up.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's no licensing cost any longer, or we pay the licensing costs on top of that?
Well, the licensing cost is built into the number now, so instead of the license to host it internally, we are now paying them to host it for us.
Okay. And all maintenance costs are included in there?
In the yes, in the ASP contract, yes.
Yes. Okay. The EMC support contract is for our own equipment, but for the support of that?
It's the maintenance agreement so that if a piece of hardware in that EMC equipment, which is sort of server-ish, if you will, goes down, that we get a drop ship and they install that replacement. It could be a hard drive, it could be a fan, it could be a processor. That's what that annual maintenance is for. So it protects us from any kind of catastrophic failure, and it also provides the labor associated with those repairs.
And this is EMC equipment that we currently own?
That's correct, both in the production and the DR environment.
Okay, so now we won't need that equipment any longer because we're going to go to this SaaS system.
correct.
And what do we do with that EMC equipment?
Give it to me.
Give it to you? Doesn't she own half of it?
Well, technically, the town bought all that stuff.
Okay. So you're fine with that?
Yep.
Not having any use of it?
And I'm very happy with that because
All
that'll
right.
save us money over the long term because I can put it into our clusters and utilize the equipment, even just from basically a hardware replacement point of view or adding more servers. Oh, sorry. I can reutilize the equipment and it'll save us money.
Okay. You have an immediate need for that?
Yes.
Okay, and how much is that going to save us over the next
I don't
3
know.
years?
I don't know.
No idea.
No.
See, this is the problem about not having an IT plan going forward, is that we have no idea to figure out what the savings might be. And this is also the problem with not having a DR. We keep asking the administration for a DR plan over and over and over again.
Can I
And
talk
we
to that for
never
1 second?
get it. We ask, we beg, we're told. Mike sits there and smiles and says he's going to put one together, and we never get one.
We actually made efforts to do that, and from the IT point of view on the town side, you're never going to get a clear picture because it's not a separate item. I don't pretend to be a financial person. I don't pretend to sit there and, I mean, I sort of know what net present value is, and I know you spread money over so many years, and I know you have capital, and you write off your capital assets, and that's not me. What I do know is that I work a system where I've seen before, and I've said that to you before, is that you don't want just to have a little DR stuck in the closet and say, hey, it costs $5,000, $100,000, $200,000, whatever. I use it as a backup system. So you need to talk disaster recovery, business continuity, and backups all in the same breath, and daily operations. So we've got 3 clusters, one at the police department, handling public safety, one in the town, handling most of town services. We worked out a deal with the library, and when their servers in the following year, and that's part of these warranty increases, when those servers needed to be replaced because they were end of life and running too slow, we worked out a deal with them of, hey, you host our DR site, we'll get you some nice strong servers, but in the event of an emergency like we've had, we take over the services and we use it at a backup site. So we're throwing backups up there, but it's also our disaster recovery. When we need disaster recovery is only theoretically a 5% possibility every year. You know, I mean, that's sort of the way you build it, you finance it, you think about it. But if I work it into my whole operations, I don't have what happened to the United States government when they had 911. They ran to their disaster recovery site, all the equipment was old, outdated, and unuseful. I use my stuff all the time for everything I can and try to make the best use out of it, because the big thing about that is I know it's alive, I know it's working. And I get the efficiencies of not only running it into disaster recovery, but business continuity. I mean, when you say disaster recovery, what do you think? And the problem is, people don't take the whole picture. Disaster recovery is not just the IT portion of it, it's the town portion of it of...
Don,
Don,
Don, thank you, Mr. Leslie. No, I get it. Number one, we didn't ask for a financial plan for disaster recovery. Number two, you were just kind of giving us a dissertation on disaster recovery. Number three, do we have a document that lays out what steps are undertaken by each of the departments when something happens, such as happened last year, so that everybody knows where to go, how it's going to work, when it's going to work, and what people need to do? That's what a disaster recovery business continuity. We never said we want you to do the net present value. We said we wanted to know what the plan was when something happens. And that 5% happened last year.
Right.
So, I mean, it's, with that, we're still requesting a disaster recovery plan. And you're right, it's got to be all-encompassing. We don't know where that stands. We don't know where the committee stands. We don't know where the plan stands. We don't know what's going to be up and running. We had accountants running around trying to get payroll done before the hurricane hit last year to make sure that the firemen and the policemen and the DPW workers and everybody else got paid so that they didn't have to be concerned about it. Those are the types of things that we're looking for in a disaster recovery plan. We don't need to go through it now, but no one's asking you to be an accountant. I certainly wouldn't wish that on anybody, having been there. But that's a disaster recovery plan, and you're absolutely right, a business continuity plan is part of that. We've still yet to see a document that lays that out. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. To Mr. Walsh's point, we've asked for it several times, we haven't seen it. That's the point.
Okay.
So,
And it's not all you. I mean, it's not all you. I mean, really, this has got to come from the first selectman's office.
Yes.
He's got to coordinate it, and we were told he was going to do that. And so far, to my knowledge, that has not been done.
That's one of
and I
our
don't know a
things-
$300 million corporation that's out there today that doesn't have this document in place. It just doesn't happen. And as big as we grow, we've got to grow with that, and we got to have that. And you're one component of it.
a big one.
Yeah, a big one, a very large one. I mean, things have come up over the last year or two, some of these storms. I mean, it took a while to get a generator up to Fairfield Woods. That pumping system that's up there where you store your data down there failed. Okay? The electricity went out. The pumps did not work. If it wasn't for the fire department running up some portable generators.
It wasn't the fire department, it was the DPW, and I worked that
Okay.
out as a
I
contingency
stand,
with them, and it's my generator.
Okay, I will stand corrected. But that room could have flooded. I mean, there was no disaster recovery whole process for the entire town that's in writing on what's going to happen.
I presented it to the Board of Finance and people 2 or 3 years ago, my plan for the 3-cluster site and the backups. I don't know if you remember or not, but it was there.
I do remember something, and I thought we asked for some follow-up and some, a broader range.
Right, and
You
then
guys-
now we
yeah.
have a meeting scheduled
Absolutely.
in October to start up the IT steering committee just for these types of issues.
Yeah, I want to go to Mrs. Albin, assuming you don't have another question. Mrs. Albin, you've been waiting patiently.
Mr. Chairman, is this item on the floor, has this item been moved as a motion yet?
No.
Because I intend to make a motion to postpone this to a date certain, our October 1 meeting. There's a lot of questions going around this table. When I saw this on our agenda, I anticipated that this would be a short item, and we've spent 40 minutes on this at this point.
Yep.
And we put that money into contingency during the budget process because there was not a plan presented to this body that we were comfortable with at that time. And it's not that straightforward tonight. If it had been straightforward, we should have been able to act on this item in about 10 minutes' time. And I think that there are questions that need to be answered for the members that sit at this table. And I don't think sitting here and spending on an item that should be a 10-minute item, we shouldn't be sitting here for 40 minutes or an hour trying to figure it out. We should have accurate information brought before us so that we can read it, we can understand it, and we can act upon it in an appropriate amount of time. So I am making a motion to postpone this item to October 1, which is our next meeting, and I would suggest that if members have questions, they get them to the chair, and he can forward them to the appropriate people within the administration and get us answers back prior to that meeting, so that when we act on it, it's a 10-minute item.
Thank you, Mrs.
Do I
Albin.
have a
Do we have a
second?
second? We'll go with Mr. DeWitt on this one, since he was, okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yep.
I think this is a simple item. I've heard everyone's issues. I agree with many of them, not all of them. Here's why it's a simple item. I'd like you to take pages 1 and pages 3 and lay them side by side. Fiscal year 14 on both pages adds up to $1,619,018. Page 3 is the budget per the budget book format, and of that $1,619,018, $100,000 is in IT contingency. If you look at page 1, there is no number in IT contingency. What the IT department is presenting on page 1 is a statement that to maintain current operations without potential of operational failure through software or hardware loss, they need $1,585,000. They are further telling you that these are the categories where that will be spent. But then they're also saying that if that $100,000 doesn't get moved out of contingency and put back up into the operational line items, that the IT department will not be able to respond to what in some cases are real and in some cases potential equipment needs. I would say the $25,000 that's in the laptops, as the paragraph says there, it is not, there are no requests at the moment. That was put in there because of the fact that people have asked for laptops, and the IT department assumed that there would be laptops, more laptop requests, but there are no specific requests for additional laptops right now. Printers, they go out of business once in a while. There is $5,000, I think, remaining in a printer maintenance line item. For Printer Scout, it would be depends on whether if the printer actually just breaks or not. That may create some difficulty. And the PC monitors, what that does is it extends out the renewal cycle. The reason that Mr. Leslie is telling you that that's what he would not spend his money on is, I'm repeating myself here a bit, but for emphasis, is that if we don't spend the money, if the town does not spend the money, what is on primarily on licensing agreements, that there is potential for some kind of significant operational disruption. With respect to the plan, what Mr. Leslie is also telling you is, page 4 is the plan that's in his head. Now, none of this has anything to do with disaster recovery, other than Munis SAS helps disaster recovery by eliminating the need to have BURS as an established disaster recovery for Munis, as a disaster recovery for Munis. He is saying that this is his plan. Current and projects underway is the 311 alert and the Munis host to the Munis conversion to a hosted service. He's saying that his plan, as far as future or prospective planning, is a phone system replacement, a LAN upgrade, and a WAN replacement. It's not a bigger plan. It's not a gigantic plan. It's not a 5-year plan. And nothing is going to change between now and October 1st. This is what you're going to get. Nothing different. So basically, what I assume the IT department is doing now is, I don't even know what they're doing now with respect to the licenses. I mean, are the licenses due and payable soon? Are we paying late fees? I mean, maybe you can bring us up to date on that, Mr. Leslie?
I've paid a number of them because I try to get these in early in the year so that when the end of the year comes, I don't get surprised by a strange cost, and I save my money in my capital, et cetera, until the end of the year, because I get very nervous about having, the bucket, and I try to make sure I stay under budget, and if I'm not going to get under budget on one item, I'll save it on other items.
So what I think I hear, the plan, what I hear the board's frustration with IT operations. And what I'm trying to say, though, is that this specific budget is not related to a disaster recovery plan. It's not related to a business contingency plan. This specific line item is funding the current budget in a manner that is required to support the operations, and if it doesn't, then we just hope to heck that nothing goes wrong with the equipment. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the commentary. I heard what you said. I'd like to explore it a little bit more. It wasn't altogether clear tonight. We have a motion before us to move this to a date certain, which is our October 1st meeting. Does anybody have any questions or comments before I call that for a vote? Okay. All in favor of moving this item forward to October 1st for our meeting then? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so the item's going to be on our October 1st agenda. And we'll speak before then and see if we can't, to Mrs. Albin's recommendation, any specific questions that people would want asked and addressed during that presentation or before that presentation, please forward them to me, and I will forward them to the administration. I will sit down with Mr. Mayor and Mr. Leslie as well, to the extent that there's time for us to do that, Mr. Leslie, if you can come in, and walk them through that. And we'll go from there for October 1st, okay? Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Mrs. Nash, thank you for being here. Mr. Leslie, thank you for your time. Mr. Mayor, thank you. Item number 5, to listen to the subcommittee updates. This can be brief, I know, and I want to thank the board members, because I know August was a busy month, and I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your August family schedules to meet in subcommittee. So I'm going to ask briefly for a brief status report on the fund balance subcommittee. You'll recall this was to come up with a policy, a long-term policy of where we're trying to take the fund balance. So what's the status of that? I believe, Mr. Walsh, this would be you.
We had an initial meeting maybe 10 days ago. It was a pretty productive meeting. We are having Mr. Centofanti come in to see us on this Thursday, September 5th, to talk to us about his recommendations and what he's seeing other towns doing throughout the state in that regard. So it was a pretty productive meeting, the first meeting. I think it's going to move along pretty quickly. We did talk about not only what the fund balance percentage should be, but also we think that there should be a recommendation in regards to how we get there and what type of time frame. And that's what we're also discussing. Something that will not be punitive against the taxpayers, but also something that would get us there, have a schedule. It wouldn't obviously just be a policy, it wouldn't be a requirement, but it would be at least something that this board can manage to and see how we're doing against what, if we can all agree on that as a board, how we're doing on a yearly basis. Maybe some years are going to be difficult because of some disaster situation. But other years, maybe we'll have more surplus than we thought we were going to have. But it'll at least put us on a track to not only have a fund balance to get to, but how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
So we're trying to make both recommendations, and we've been talking about both.
Do you guys have an estimated time frame for complete?
We're trying to get there by the October meeting.
Okay.
I'm just trying to tell you. I mean,
It's on
yeah,
schedules,
it's
yeah.
schedules. I mean, we're going to spend some time with Mr. Centofanti. He's also coming down for the audit committee, so we're trying to kill two birds with one stone and best utilize his time so he's not charging us for that.
Yeah.
So we're trying to knock him out, get his expertise. He's worked on this as not only actually as an auditor and seen what other communities have been doing. He's also done it for his own town on being there on their Board of Finance. So, a lot of towns are going through the same process. So I think we're moving forward pretty well. I would be hard-pressed to see how 2 more meetings, which we're going to try to get done before October, but it's our thought that we would get there.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Brockfeld on the Investment Subcommittee.
Mr. Flynn, I'll be brief. We had a meeting of this committee on past Wednesday, I believe. Mr. Brown was there as well as myself. August is so busy, our third member wasn't able to attend.
That would be me.
And Mr. Mayor, of course, and Ms. Fossey was there. And we also had a representatives from an investment firm as well. This has been a long suffering project. It's been going on off and on for years, actually, going back actually to the last administration. And a lot of things and hurricanes and train stations and so forth have intervened. So I think for the first time, I have to give some credit to Mr. Mayor. He's actually taken the ball on this and really started to get us going in the right direction. I think for the first time there's light at the end of the tunnel, but I will say there's still a lot of work to be done here. There's some well, let me emphasize, this is unlike some other projects like your subcommittee. At the end of the day, this is an advisory role we have here. This is clearly the administration's job to make a final decision, and they've been good enough to open the door and work with us and get our input. So I think there's still some more philosophical work to be done in terms of this investment balance, how big it is, why it's so big, and really what the nature of the money is, and therefore how it should be invested. We still have to work through that. But Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you have anything else to add. And in terms of a timetable, I honestly don't know. This is
What are next steps?
Next steps, really, I think, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Mayor, I think that the next step really is for us to write an actual investment policy guideline. I think until we have a policy guideline in place, everything else almost can't, there are no next steps.
Do you have a timeline for when that's
I
going?
don't. I defer to Mr. Mayor on that, if he's willing to venture a guess on that.
Mr. Mayor, do you have a timeline on the potential investment policy?
Yeah, let me talk a little about the meeting. At the meeting, I distributed a couple things. Cash and investment balances by bank and brokerage institutions, 17 specific institutions. I detailed the cash. The town has cash, but the cash is in a multiplicity of funds. There's a general fund, there's cash flow, AP requirements, cash flow, payroll requirements, both town and Board of Ed. The Water Pollution Control Authority has cash. The Internal Service Fund has cash. The bond premium account has cash. There's grant revenue, there's other revenue, there's interest payables. All of these all of these balances need to be addressed from a cash flow projection individually and specifically. It's not just one big bucket of money. I also listed, provided with a description and list of the current investments, and I guess with the comments that we have too many, we buy in too small a blocks, thereby we create excessive transaction costs. Also, if you look at our, the cash investment balances was for the last 3 years. If you look at the last 3 years, we've had about $30 million consistently invested in these 17, or at least 8 of the 17 institutions. So theoretically, if the town 3.5 years ago had a clear understanding of its cash flow needs and projections, it would have been able to say, well, this goes in 5-year stuff. And we would have been able to realize, a 2 to 3% additional return on our dollars. Our current duration on our invested funds is about 2.2 years. I also passed out and discussed an investment policy development strategy, all the components that need to be in it. Now, and Ken agrees with this, I think. An investment policy has all kinds of paragraphs: prudence, fiduciary, internal control, but the main part is asset. What are you going to do with your assets? What are you going to invest in? So we talked about that. So what we're doing right now, and again, backing up a little bit more, when in September 15th of last year, the work was, I'm almost done. The work was, you guys spent 2 hours on IT. I'm going to spend 10 minutes on this. The work
Fine,
was,
let you.
5 minutes, thank you. The division of responsibilities was Mr. Hillard to continue to take care of the cash management, and I took care of the remaining aspects of the finance department. So July 1, I became responsible for the investments. So what we're doing now is we are, and I think this was a consensus opinion of the group there, reducing the number of banks, reducing the number of brokerage accounts. We are transitioning to purchasing larger blocks of selected securities, and we're going to do this transition strategically to avoid unnecessary transition and sizing adjustment costs. So we are moving, so that's what needs to be, that's what is being, and we're also evaluating this long list to see if there's anything on there that we should move out. So those are the things that we're doing. And as far as having an actual document written, it's one of the line item, one of the high priority tasks on my project's to-do list, and I hope to have that done sometime in the next 2 months, but sooner if possible.
So by the November meeting, we might have something?
Yeah.
Can you, Mr. Brockfield, can you follow up on that? So we'll say an investment policy by the November meeting or so that we can share. That's what Mr. Mayor just said.
Well, then, by all means, I agree.
Okay. Thanks.
I lost that just last second.
Yeah. Reporting subcommittee. Mr. Brown.
Okay, thank you. So the reporting subcommittee, what we're doing is we're focusing really on the quarterly meetings. Mr. Walsh, Mr. Stone's on the committee with me. We're working with Mr. Mayor and Ms. Bassi. We met on August 29th, which was last Thursday, and really our focus is on 3 items: the information to be included on the quarterly reports, the format of our quarterly reports, and also the timing of our quarterly meetings, especially the fourth quarter. We basically focused on the first 2 points, and we'll get to the third. I mean, our goal is consistency with the information presented and how it is presented. So we reviewed the reports from our last quarterly meeting. We made recommendations. We made some adjustments. And it was, I think, a pretty healthy discussion going back and forth. We're going to meet again on October 15th to review the recommendations and adjustments and see how it looks. Our goal is on October 29th to present the information in the new format to this board on a quarterly meeting. And then any feedback at that time or any further recommendations, we'll take it back and we'll adjust again.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Brown. I appreciate that. Anybody else have anything from a subcommittee that I did not call? We'll go to Mr. Walsh and then Mrs. Albin.
And Ms. Albin's on my committee, so she might want to talk about our committee. But I did have a question, and I'll give it to the chair's indulgence. Like I said, one of the things on our fund balance policy committee was that, whether we should make a recommendation of how to get to where we want to get to, if once we set what that number is. But, you know, what we've talked about a little bit is, I don't know how much time we want to waste if we get to a point of a fund balance recommendation, but no one wants to have a formal, at least even a policy on how to get there. So I'm kind of looking for what the rest of the board thinks about that. Do you think that that's something that we should put into the policy? Because if no one thinks that that should be part of the policy, we don't want to waste a lot of time, you know, going round and round and drafting language and all sorts of stuff, and then people come back and say, no, we don't mind the fund balance percentage or number, but we don't want to really have anything to do with how we're going to get there. We'll just deal with it on a year-to-year basis.
Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
And Ms. Leclerc is on the committee with us as well, so, you know, I think it'd be good for us to hear it from the rest of the members.
My thought, my own personal thought, since you asked, would be that I think it's really a two-stage process. I would love rather than later to hear what the collective committee's thought is on what the percentage should be, what's our target. Then I do, and I'm very happy for you guys to take on the thought process of what are our options on way to get there. I think that's a longer conversation and is probably separate from the conversation regarding what the target is. So I think develop the target and then come back and say, here's a list of options that we can pursue. And that's probably a conversation for us to have collectively with the Board of Selectmen, you know, much like we did with our capital planning workshop. Maybe that's a conversation that has to happen with the Board of Selectmen as well as representatives from the RTM, where we discuss, here's our policy. Because whatever that policy becomes is obviously going to be in each year's budget. So what we don't want to do is be marching down the road towards that policy and have one of the bodies say, well, it's a tough budget year, so we're not going to follow that policy. So I think that it's a broader group, maybe once it gets to, here are our options for getting it. That's my own personal.
Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Just to supplement, I agree with Tom totally, but I would supplement by saying that I think the biggest thing that I would get out of a report from you guys would be that I've heard in my time on the board a lot of mysticism about what
that's right.
the expected percentages are of fund balance to satisfy rating agencies and whoever else might be looking at our town. And yet I've never actually gotten an answer. Whenever we ask if that's some sort of fact,
Yep.
we always, then everybody goes, whoa, it's not a fact. You know, we don't know if it's a fact. So I think if you guys simply were able to clarify that issue for us, then I agree with Tom. Then I think it is a more of a multi-party discussion about how we get there. I think at this point, we don't even know exactly where we want to go.
Sure.
Right.
Let alone how we do it.
Right.
Anybody else? Okay.
Wouldn't hurt to have a target.
All right. Well, maybe that's the direction we'll go, because that'll simplify it for our committee, at least at this point, that it's kind of a two-stage process. Because to us, we were looking at it, that it was two things that we were trying to get to, so we can focus all our energies on the first part.
Yeah.
Because I will tell you, things that we're hearing and seeing is that number should be closer to 10%. And at the current rate of what we're doing, even with the good things that this board has done and it's been supported, you know, throughout the process, we're looking at our current trajectory at that taking us 20 years or so.
Right.
And that seems to be a fair distance in the future, and we're going to either have to pick up the pace on that or get lucky in some years. And, you know, so I think our target is going to have to be higher than it has been. And I think you're right. We're going to need to have buy-in from the Board of Selectmen and the RTM. And maybe it is a better discussion to have globally on how we get there once we establish what it is.
I agree. No.
So.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Good conversation. I appreciate the hard work your group's doing. Mrs. Alvin, you had something.
Question, since we have these subcommittee reports, I realize that Mr. DeWitt chairs a committee that's not one solely from this board, but we haven't heard from them in a long time. Do they have a status update?
Mr. DeWitt, do you want to comment? I presume you're talking about the not-for-profit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Committee, Board of Selectmen meeting. No, we don't have an update.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Mr. Stone?
Are we going to meet? Are we going to do something with that committee?
Yes?
All right. Any other questions?
Point out, Mr. Stone's not even on the committee. Yeah, okay, yeah.
the budget committee now? We need to have a budget committee.
We do. We're going to, I was hoping Mr. Bolito would be here tonight. We'll talk about that at the next meeting. Any other communications? I do not know of anything. I want to thank everyone for their time tonight. This did go a little bit longer on item number 4, and we'll follow back up on that. Do I have a motion? Mr. Brockfeld is second. Mr. Walsh, all in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We're adjourned, everybody. Thank you.